This isn't about fear. It's about proof, and at Paranormal M, we go beyond the thrill to the truth beyond the tremor. Subscribe and face it. Face me. Voices beneath the bed. Maybe it's just that my family has memories like old oak trunks, deep rings and long echoes. But whenever we gather, conversation always slides toward the eerie. Normally it's my father who smirks and dismisses our ghost chatter with the dry nonsense. But this time he surprised us. He leaned back and he began, and he said that when I was about 10, I was staying at my old grandparents' farmhouse just outside Lancaster. My older sister and I slept in a little walnut-paneled room that used to be my dad's when he was a kid. The air, it always smelled of apples and varnish. One rainy evening, we'd run wild in the orchard, and it was basically all day. We couldn't settle down. We started a pillow fight war and laughing too loud until Grandpa shouted to the stairs to keep it down. We flopped into the creaky bed and daring each other with ghost stories, seeing who would break first. My sister was halfway through some tale about haunted mills, and that's when the bed lurched. It lurched hard, not just a tremor, but a deep grinding shake that rattled the headboard against the wall. And on the wooden floor, it sounded like thunder, and we froze. Then, from the far corner of the old wardrobe, came low, rabid whispers in a language I'd never heard before. It was like somebody muttering through a fan. Thinking maybe somebody had crawled under the bed to make it move, we slid beneath it ourselves, clutching each other, hearts thudding. We waited for Granddad to burst in, certain that he'd heard the racket, but minutes stretched into what felt like an hour. There was nothing, no footsteps, only the whispering, soft and relentless. When our courage finally cracked, we climbed back onto the bed, dragging the quilt over our heads, trembling until the first pale light seeped through the curtains. But sleep never came. At breakfast, we spilled everything to Grandma, who frowned, and to Granddad, who chuckled. He swore he'd heard nothing except the moment one of us fell out of the bed early in the night. He was sure that we'd been dreaming, but I know that we weren't. The bed's banging alone should have brought the whole house running. Dad ended with a simple shrug and a wry smile. We never figured out what it was. But I learned one thing. Never tell ghost stories after dark in that room. And even now, with the scent of coffee and daylight in the air, the memory left a shiver behind. It wasn't just a story. It was that my father, a resident skeptic, told it without a single trace of doubt. Didn't know what daylight had to smell. The man never came up the stairs. From the time I was 6, shortly after my family bought the house, till I was about 15 and moved into the larger room in the back of the house, I had a nightly visitor I could never see. Our upstairs rooms were tiny. My little bedroom was crowded with a bed, a dresser, and a mountain of toys. And that left few ways to place the furniture, so the foot of my bed ended up pointing straight at my bedroom door. When the door was open, it created an unbroken line from the old front door, went up the narrow stairwell, to my doorway. And from my pillow, I could watch the entire staircase and the old front entrance, and that mattered. My lights out was strict. It was 7:30 p.m. till I turned 16. Yet each night at precisely 9 p.m. I would lie awake with the door shut and listen to heavy boots on the creaky stairs. They would climb slowly, and they'd stop at the small landing just outside my door. My chest would tighten and my breath would catch as I waited for the knob to turn, and for some impossible reason, it would appear in the doorway. So one night, I decided to test my terror. I left my door open when I went to bed, and my foolish courage told me that seeing it would make it less frightening. Part of me suspected the door itself might be the only thing between me and whatever it was. Still, I had to know. At 9, the sounds began. I heard that old front door's latch rattle. I heard a soft thump. It was like somebody closing the screen. And then heavy footsteps. They were going up the staircase. Fixing my stare into the black at the top of the stairs, expecting to make out the silhouette of shoulders, a head, or anything that moved through the dim. Excuse me. And there was nothing. Counted the steps because I knew their number. 1, 2, 3, until absurdly, found myself saying the last 2 aloud, as if shouting at air that would make it visible. When the steps stopped at the landing, and no shade filled the space, my breathing hitched and a shower of pinprick light swam across my vision. I fainted. I remembered nothing till morning, and when I woke to find my bedroom door shut. Over cereal, I asked my mother if she'd closed it for me, and she smiled and said no. She'd stayed downstairs late, curled up on the sofa where the old front door sat hidden behind the cushions. My parents' bedroom was a small room to the left of the stairs, despite the years. None of them had ever heard the steps that I swore I did, and they looked puzzled and a little worried for me. A few years after that, the upstairs was gutted and the old front entrance was sealed into the exterior wall to make room for a sunroom. My younger brothers inherited the larger room, and apparently, when I used to come up the stairs, lost interest. They never heard the boots. I sometimes still listen on quiet nights, half hoping, half ashamed, and maybe I'll again be the only one who ever heard a sound nobody else could see. The last visit. One of my younger brothers came to our lives in a way none of us could have imagined. He began as an emergency foster baby, a newborn, tiny and trembling. Not from his own choices, but because his birth mother had been using heavy drugs while pregnant. His biological grandmother was a fierce, complicated woman, an anarchist biker who distrusted every government agency and also a registered member of a Native American tribe at one name. Her family history was layered. One branch began with the runaway slave, whom the tribe had sheltered generations ago. Her bloodline held African roots and the heritage of 2 different native nations. Her daughter, my brother's birth mother, had never embraced the tribe, and she lived on the edge. A sex worker with no known partner, no interest in motherhood. When the grandmother came to see her newborn grandson, she found him barely fed, sitting in a soiled diaper. And in that instant, all her defiance dissolved, and she called Child Protective Services. Something that she'd sworn she'd never do, because she knew the baby wouldn't survive otherwise. That call brought him to her home. The months that followed were telling. His mother never shut off her scheduled visits. The grandmother came at first and then began to fade from view, and eventually the course kind of terminated parental rights. Grandmother fought the decision out of love, but not readiness. But her own life was tangled with a criminal record and a long battle with alcohol. She couldn't provide a safe home. The tribal council had the right to claim and raise him, but after reviewing the prenatal exposure to drugs and the special care he'd need, they declined. My parents stepped forward, and after a long wait, adoption was granted. Adoption. Years later, when my brother was about 8, he came home from school unusually quiet. Did Grandma die? He asked out of nowhere. My mom blinked pretty startled, and she said, "Why did you think that?" And he looked down because I felt like she could see me today, like to say goodbye. My mom's heart raced, fearing the worst. Maybe somebody had followed him, and she called a social worker. The reply chilled us, and his biological grandmother had died the previous day. She was no saint. She lived rough and made dangerous choices. But in that final mysterious visit, whatever you choose to call it, her love cut through every wall. And somehow she found a way to see him one last time, to let him know that he'd been loved all along. The man on the wall, or why I'm a wordy little bastard. It's spooky season, which means my brain thinks it's deadline day for weird childhood memories. So here we go. Sorry in advance if I ramble. I'm a wordy little bastard and I tell stories, and it's part of the charm. So anyway, this one stuck with me for decades. And I grew up in Pennsylvania, and as heaven knows, about 5 or 6. Let's call it 95 because round numbers are comfortable. Back when my dad drove a beat-up van delivering rolls and baguettes for a little bakery, couldn't really swing for a babysitter. So I came along on a lot of routes, and early mornings at the bakery, me playing with action figures in the back while he loaded crates. And a day of cruising was from one drop-off to the next. It was boring in a way that made you invent adventures. And one afternoon, we stopped at a place I always thought of as a Stonebridge Tavern. Not the Stone Tavern that I swear I misremembered the exact name for years. Probably the last stop on the route, or maybe Dad wanted to post-shift beer. I only know that we lingered longer than usual. And Dad was chatting with a buddy at the bar, and I was fidgeting, doing whatever 5-year-old me does. And then my stomach staged a revolt, and I had to pee. Since we hadn't hung out there before, I had no clue where the restroom was. And there's some important context here. I had imaginary friends, but I knew they were imaginary. Never once did I actually think that they were real or see them like other kids see toys come to life. And also, I've always taken long bathroom breaks, like legendary ones. 15 to 20 minutes on a bad day. Grandpa was the same, and apparently constipated genes run in the family. So when I was tiny, it sometimes hurt, and I'd sit there forever. And to cope, I'd imagine my favorite Ninja Turtle, Donatello, the purple one. That was for reasons I can't fully justify now. I'd strolling in, slapping me on the back, telling me it would be fine. Child logic works every time. Dad pointed me to a big wooden door across from the bar and said, "Bathroom's down there." I opened it and found a flight of gray stone steps leading to one-room basement bathrooms. There was concrete walls and a single bare tub of a small mirror, a sink to the left and a urinal and a toilet stall and a divider but no door. There was no windows, no side exits. The only way in or out was at the top of the stair door, and the only light was that lonely bulb over the mirror. Cozy, if your idea of cozy involves damp cement. So I'm on the throne doing the business, staring at the blank concrete opposite of me. I don't exactly remember the first click of the thing happening, only that the shadow appeared. The silhouette of a man in a low-brimmed hat projected into the wall. And for that shadow to exist, somebody would have had to have been standing on the other side of the stall divider, directly in front of the sink, unseen from where I sat. I remember hearing his voice, and it was low and oddly comforting. Never felt scared, and if anything, I felt companionable. It sounds kind of weird, I know. He tried to make me laugh. He asked if I liked dogs, and yeah, here I changed the details, but the shadow of a small dog bobbed up beside his. The most vivid bit, and the part I still see when his memory rolls by in my head. It's when he pulls out a yo-yo, and the man played with it, and the dog's shadow would swat at the thing, and I'd laughed. It was pure and ridiculous kid laughter. The whole scene felt like those silly little plays they put on with action figures in the back of the bakery. And then the man told me plain as day that you have to go now. Not that I have to go, but you have to go now. And the shadow slowly faded, and I wiped, flushed, swung around the divider, and of course the bathroom was empty. Washed my hands, trudged up the stairs and into the tavern. Dad looked down at me and said something like, "That took longer than usual, buddy. You all right?" I said without any filters because I was 5. I was talking to the man on the wall. The look on Dad's face is still carved in my memory, a hot second of something like terror threaded with genuine worry. A few people nearby went quiet and turned toward us. Dad asked, "What man were you talking to?" I answered, "The man on the wall, Daddy." If you ever want to look on a grown man's face when you suddenly 3 different emotion colors at once, well, that was it. He told the bartender to watch me, and then here's what gets kind of cinematic. He and a couple of the regulars sprinted down the stairs into the basement. They came back up pale and whispering and shaken. They asked me a bunch of questions, but I only remember saying the simple bits. That he had a dog shadow and a yo-yo, and that he told me I had to go. So we went home. Life kept moving in its creaky, unremarkable way. And a year later, Dad brought the whole thing up again. He said something about a newspaper story. Some little girl had reported seeing a ghost in the Stone Bridge basement bathroom around the same time. I remember squinting at the folded newspaper page and thinking, nope, that's not what I saw. Different details, but the paper did note that another child claimed to have seen the spirit last year, and I'm pretty sure that that line meant me. So do I believe in ghosts? Well, not really. I'm a bit skeptical adult and with a healthy appreciation for plausible explanations. But that night in the bathroom is a real memory, not some bedroom story I cooked up. There's no way anybody else could have been in there with me. The only entrance was right in front of my father in a crowded bar, and I poked around for an old article a few times over the years and came up empty. I don't even know if the stone bridge still stands, and I think it's shut for a while, and might have changed hands. So that's my thing. A shadow man in a hat and a yo-yo and a playful dog. The bulb light on a concrete wall and a 5-year-old who spent an absurd amount of time on a toilet. Got comfort from imaginary friends. And apparently, maybe something else. Still don't know what the explanation is, and I kind of like that it's unresolved. It's a tiny little mystery I drag out during spooky season like a slightly moth-eaten sweater. It fits me. The equal parts ridiculous and stubbornly memorable. The quiet that wouldn't stay. My parents split up recently. I was still living in the old house I grew up in. I'd been here about 17 years. Nothing spooky ever happened until a few months ago. My dad started seeing a woman that we sort of knew from around the neighborhood, and she wasn't mysterious at first. But there were always whispers about her family. Years of cleansings and strange ceremonies, and neighbors saying they'd once heard chanting from the apartment below when my parents first moved into the block. So fast forward 30 years, without the sound effect. My parents are divorced. There's some details I'll skip, and after a while, let's just say my dad let her move in. And that's when things changed. I began having nightmares like I'd never had before. Vivid, cold, wake-up sweating nightmares. And then the dog started acting up every night. Precisely between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. and they'd wake up and they'd bark at nothing. For a couple of weeks it eased up, so I figured maybe it would just pass. But I asked my dad to make her leave because she'd been rude to him and to us. She flipped when my sister and I went out for dinner with him without inviting her. In the same hour, I talked to him about it, and the house did a 180. Small things at first. Picture would slide off a shelf, or closet doors flung open and shut. The small speaker would turn itself on at 3 in the morning. And once, a charging cord came out of the wall unplugged, even though no dog was near it. Little things you tell yourself are coincidences until they're not. 4 days later, my dad finally told her to go. After she left, the subtle stuff kept happening. But the last night was the worst. We kept an electric space heater downstairs from our dog. She can't even climb stairs on her own anymore, and she hates blankets. We bought a model that clicks off and screams an alarm and tips over. And at 2 a.m., the house filled with smoke and blaring fire alarms, and the heater had been pushed up against the wooden gate that we used to keep the dog safe and kind of knocked over. The unit didn't shut off, and there's no safety click, no tip switch. Just the heat against the wood and the horrible metallic scream of the smoke alarm. If the smoke detector hadn't gone off, I don't even want to imagine how this could have ended. We were awake and shaken, staring at the toppled heater and a gate scorch mark that hadn't been there before. The quiet we'd had for years had become something that wouldn't leave. The castle basement. I used to work in what is now considered a golf course in New York. It has a restaurant type of setting. It's in what used to be a residence back in the mid to late 1800s, and it was created here in 1852. The building is said to contain the stones from Whitby Abbey, a 13th century New Yorkshire, England ruin. It was private until 1921. That's when it became part of the country club. Now, this was a seasonal job in a professional kitchen as a salad/dessert girl. I worked in the food industry for 11 years, but it was never this high-end. The exterior is a gorgeous sight to behold, if you're into structure and especially history. The moment I laid my eyes on it, I had taken my phone out and looked up the history. I had Kitty doing this. I even did this to my first apartment. I like to learn new things. So, Erie 1. So this place looked like a mini castle. Mind you, it was a personal residence at one point and had 3 floors. Offices were on top, occasions and events were held on the second, and then there was the basement. That's where maintenance workers changed, needed condiments, and spare dishes. The basement, it just gave off an eerie feeling. Not at first. I really wasn't paying attention to it at first. But as I got comfortable, the more I relaxed, the more I felt it. After about a month in, that's when it started. Walk into the basement through the hidden stairs that are tucked to the side, hidden from view of the customers. The moment you touched that cold stone floor, you could feel eyes just watching you. And it was always coming from the opening of the side room where the boiler was. It never passed that walkway. You couldn't see it, but you could feel it watching you come and go. Like a child on timeout in a corner, waiting for their parents to tell them they can move again. I had to go to the basement to get my chef smock in order to work. This was about 6 years ago. So, I was old enough to know that there was somebody there, but also to know that ghosts were taboo or unbelieved by the majority of civilization. So I kept this to myself like a sad but dirty secret. One day in the bathroom, and a fellow chef came in. She was changing, and I heard her excusing herself if I were to see anything that I shouldn't. But she was unable to change downstairs because she felt somebody was watching her from that room. That specific boiler room. My head jerked a bit back, hearing her, and once I stepped out of the stall and I was done, I turned to stare at her to make sure she was being serious. She was. She said the exact same thing I felt. Someone was in that boiler room, silently watching us. I admitted I too had forgotten that feeling when I get to the basement. But I thought it was just me. It only confirmed, well, that it wasn't, and that I wasn't losing my mind either. As I'm washing my hands, well, she changed, kept my head low to prevent any accidental glimpse. Though I explained to her it kind of makes sense if you know the history of the place. She only told me what she knew, which everybody knew. The bricks were from an actual castle. With that, I confirmed core research that yes, they were from a castle from England. The castle was found in ruin, so the creator decided, why let the bricks go to waste? I guess. I wanted to say something, but my tongue was fighting my teeth to come out and say it, so I did. I explained that because of what might have happened within the walls of the castle when it was in its peak, one could only imagine what hell had been placed during those horrid times. Kingdom reigns, tortures of prisoners, etc. Whatever part of the castle they took, they might have brought a friend with them in the process. Or only God knows what was buried here before they built the whole residence, but if that was the case, wouldn't it have been like free to roam instead of being confined to one room? All I know is we always tried our best to avoid the basement if necessary. The Castle 2, The Old Woman. Built in 1852, the building is said to contain stones from Whitby Abbey, 13th century North Yorkshire, England ruin. Now, in the first story, I wrote my constant experience with the basement, but this one I'm about to share is about a room. Now, there is an area above the basement that's allowed for customers. That's the bathroom. Now, when you get to that first level, there's like 3 doors to that floor. Men's to the left, women's straight ahead, and to the right is where they sort of made this dressing, changing room for the main guests for events. Now, I don't pay much attention to any room specifically except where it needs to be, which is 1, the bathroom, 2, the main kitchen, 3, the prep kitchen, and 4, the basement. I didn't get any eerie feeling from any of the other rooms as I did in that basement, so it wasn't like the attention was needed for anywhere else. One day I walked downstairs to the bathroom. I walked past the changing room and something caught my eye and a feeling came upon me. The room door was open, and when you walked past the door, you could see what looked like 2 or 3 cedar sofa next to a small bed table for the lamp. A bit deeper in was sort of a makeup table with a mirror and a chair in front of it. I always see myself in that mirror when I walk by it, when the door's left open. But that day, the glimpse of an old woman sitting in the chair staring at herself in the mirror, her hands resting on the surface. I caught the white of her hair as it was up in a bun. She wore a dress that seemed a bit old, but it was long. The face I couldn't see was almost faceless, and her head was slightly hung, but she was in the room with the light off. Mind you, this was a quick 5-second catch of the eye. 5-second catch that made me stop at the bathroom door, hand on the doorknob asking myself, what the fuck did I just see? No customers were allowed in until a certain time. No worker fit that description I caught of her. I stared at the door and slowly let go of the bathroom knob so I could walk toward it. Because, of course, you walk towards things that you know shouldn't be there. I would probably be the first idiot to die in a horror movie. I stand in front of the room door. The only other way out is the mirror, which is completely free. No one was in front of it but me. The chair was free and sitting under the respective table. No old woman. I read a bit more into the castle's residences after that. Her appearance seemed to be up to date and be from the castle's origins in England. So it had to be the residence of the castle after it was built. turns out that the room was the owner's mother or mother-in-law's bedroom. It was her favorite room. Midnight movement. So this was literally last night. I was on the phone with a friend. I usually have my switch on the TV watching YouTube videos. Wink, wink. Now, having it been idling for a while, the switch turned off. A few minutes after the TV followed as well. Now, as I'm talking on the phone, I heard something, and I look up to my TV, and my TV was literally shaking. Like someone was wiggling it. Not turning, but shaking. I'm staring at it, and it just continued as if somebody was trying to get it to work. I'm staring. Are you serious? Now I'm completely quiet, and my friend on the phone was asking if I was okay. I said, yeah, but dude, my TV's shaking on its own. At that moment, the TV came to a sudden stop, as if whoever was shaking it heard me, and literally out of the corner of my eyes, if I was staring at the TV, a partial white figure had walked out my bedroom. Me, being dumb, yelled out, "Oh, come on, you broke the first rule." I know there's something here in my apartment, and I have animals they play with. I caught them on video playing with orbs, many orbs. When my animal stares behind me, all I say is, as long as you don't show yourself to me, we're fine. So my roommate of 7 years broke a rule. Boom. Rather hilarious. So I'm going to talk about this thing during my mid-years living in this apartment because I find it hilarious. You see, I am quite a quiet introvert. I wake up, play games, watch movies, go to work, come home, do it again. My home has tranquility and solitude. So all is calm like the lakes when only the wind moves the water. Now during this time, I was trying to help a friend get away from her horrible living situation with family. I've known her for a few years since college, so it wasn't a spew-of-the-moment decision. Spur, I hope. I was just sick of hearing the bullshit she was putting under because they felt since they're family, they have a right to use and abuse her. I know what it's like. But her issues were a step up from what I went through. So after my fiancé at the time had left to go back to his home to help with his family, she came a few months later. And might I add, before I finally got her in though, I helped her get a job in the same place I worked at, so she can have her own money. Before she got the job, I told her if she stood with me, she can stay rent-free till she gets a job. The month after that, we start. We can just talk about payments. So I got her the job, and for the first month, she stood rent-free. She bought whatever she wanted, and I made no objections. At this time, I had tons of cats, so we shared a room while I had the other room with the cats locked in. She had nothing to sleep on but my bed, so we figured, why not? I slept on the sofa. Red flags here. Now she'd like to be entertained and wanted me to constantly entertain her and chat with her. She has her own little TV with her PS4, and I have my big TV where my Xbox is set up on. She liked a lot of chick flick movies while I enjoyed horror. So when she felt something was great to her, she would force me to watch it. You can always say no. I'd let her watch it on my big TV, but I wouldn't pay much attention to it, and that would just annoy her. Now here comes the fun part. Within the first month, she had, done a lot of things to literally get me angry. Because she found how I acted hilarious, but she would always say, As long as you don't throw me out, you can do whatever you want to me. Over time, I was growing more annoyed and rather angry toward her. I was reminding myself I'm helping her. Didn't want her to go back to, what I was helping her stay away from. But the fact I was being disrespected just to intentionally get a rise out of me was going too far. When I get upset, my accent changes, and she finds this hilarious. I was born speaking English in a Spanish family, but I enjoy mimicking accents. But when I get upset, my accent rises from English to some New York Italian accent. She stops when she starts hearing the Spanish accent because that means she's hit the red zone, and she'll tend to back off. The rising anger out of me started causing the flow in my apartment to feel different, almost like pressure, like the moment you walked in. At the end of the first month, all I asked was for $20 to $40 a week starting her second month with me. She agreed till I realized she lied after 2 weeks and still has no money. Or at least said they had no money. Talked about how she had no money after the phone, the weed, and buying food. This is like a slalom tracker. Whatever that sport is where you're skiing down with these red flags everywhere. Being fed up, I was cooking something and she took out an 18-count carton of eggs. She was about to put it on the counter, not fully on it, but halfway, and I stared and I said in my head, I hope that shit gets smacked out of your hand. At that moment, the egg smashed to the floor. And from the way it literally looked like somebody smacked it out of her hand. I stared at this, and she jumped back and went to save the one that didn't break. I didn't tell her anything, as I just felt that it was her clumsiness. Over time, since that day, things even at work were being thrown out of her hand or smacked out of her hand, like spanking a child's hand, telling her no to make her stop. She even told me that she was in the shower. She felt some touching her. And all of a sudden, I heard her squeal. She came out quickly. I asked her what's wrong, and she said that she, felt something. Just push her into the tub. I sat there like, oh crap, what have I done? A lot of weird things have been happening around her. And again, since that day. At the end of the second month, I kind of threw her things out. She became too much and was too disrespectful, even at work. I became rather vulgar to her after a while before I threw her out. A day or two after I did, so I approached her at work and apologized for throwing her out, but she left me no choice. A few months after, she went back to her mom's house when I threw her out. She told me that these weird things are still happening. I told her about my roommates after we were at work, and she had some tongs for tossing a salad. They were literally slapped out of her hand and slid across the floor. That day, I told her that my home has others, and it's from you pissing me off. You ruin their flow and probably just making you pay for disrespecting me in my own home, in their home after all. And I did it for you. After a while, she no longer had those problems, but things were going downhill for her. It's because a friend was doing to her what she did to me. Although they didn't live with her, she was going above and beyond for them only to be mistreated. And after she came running to me many times about this, I got fed up. And when she said I'm sick of apologizing to people when I didn't do anything, so I told her she needs to get over it because this is your karma for what you did to me. Not once did you ever apologize after all I did for you. And I did a lot more than any of your friends or family ever did. You've done all this, and don't come to me crying. My home is sort of back to being like a solitude. The energy's back to being tranquil, but I have to kind of give up a lot after my emotional trauma. First encounters of my first apartment. Now, I've lived in my current, which is my first apartment, for 7 years. I was in my late 20s when I left my mom's apartment that had their own spooks. Not gonna lie, I was scared. Not of the neighborhood or the people, but not knowing what I was going to deal with alone. Every time I was left alone in my mother's house, I was always messed with by who or whatever else was in there. Since I was 6, this has been happening to me. And this time, I didn't have anyone to run to. I had my cats, and I felt that they would protect me. I was paranoid at first, but after a while, I was okay. Now, as I got comfortable, I figured, okay, quiet, silent. Nothing is in this house to that stature to worry about. I have a 2-bedroom, and one room was originally supposed to be an office and video game room. And then there's the other bedroom. I locked my cats out of the bedroom so I can sleep on multiple occasions, and at least make sure to close the door. One day I woke up and I saw my door slowly open. I inhaled so hard and jumped up to see my cat waltzing in. This happened on several occasions, even when my fiancé, at the time, was here, and, well, he tries to say he didn't close the door right, but one day I saw his messenger open, and he wrote to a friend telling them, I closed the door, and there was no way in hell that door was even able to open on its own. I sat there at nights just staring at the door. Now I freaked out more because after we made the office into a cat's room, and moved everything into one room, office stuff in the bedroom, we would close the cat's room and my bedroom. But yet we wake up every other day with both doors opened and the cat's with us and walking on us, climbing on us. One time I'm on my sofa in the bedroom because I had to try out my bed, and I saw my closet door, which has a mirrored sliding door, just shaking. It was like something was in the closet moving around. The cats were nowhere in my bedroom. They were locked in their room. The mirror looked like a portal effect as the pressure of the movement was coming from the middle of the door. But the door's open and no one's there. I just stared at it. But by this time, I wasn't as petrified of it, but that's when I had accepted I had others. And I video recorded a few times to catch the cats playing with the moving orbs. Not dust, trust me. I know the difference. They look like little balls of light flickering like a flashlight. So, I made a rule. As long as you don't show yourself, we're fine. Work ghost. I've been working at an industry for 11 years. 8 years at one location and 3 years at another. Now, I'm not sure, since I go through a lot, whether it's really the same one or something else, or I just happen to be in places where the unseen are. But then again, only Lord knows what's put this ground before man put above. Now, this experience hasn't happened a lot since it's at work, and I'm not as attentive since it's a fast-paced environment. Dealing with food orders and incomplete workers, or incompetent workers, will do that to you. But there are times when I've been alone when it's slow. Others are on break or called out and told not to come in. I'm on the line cleaning up, fixing a small order. And out of my peripheral vision, somebody walked over toward my direction to walk past me. They never seen me walking away. Mind you, I'm on the line where the food is, and it's a straight path to the doorway, and there's no turns. I even witnessed this once or twice at the register. And again, there's no turns behind me or anything where this person can jump over and hide. It's always an old man in a white shirt. I don't get to see anything else because by the time I get to give any visual attention, he's already about to pass me. He comes out of nowhere like he took a sudden turn or something. What creeps me out more was when, like, they walked past me. You can feel the gust of sudden wind. Somebody having walked past you, sort of at a fast pace if they were in a rush. So I'm looking forward, and he rushes behind me, and I see him approaching me from the right. But I never ever see him. It's like he disappears right behind me. I don't usually ask anybody if they saw anything, or if they walked by, unless I knew for sure. Try not to look as crazy as I normally already look. I feel straitjackets don't suit me. Other than that, nothing out of the ordinary. Besides that, really happened in this location at all, well, to me. So as much as I have the elderly man sneaking up behind me, in the second location, though, this location had stuff happening. Not as often, but still happens. I worked in this location for 3 years, since the other one closed for good. So anyways, I have opened and closed this store. I've had this other store many times, sometimes the same day. But the closings, sometimes they didn't go off as easy as when you're the last one out and waiting for the manager to drive you home. Or waiting inside till the next bus arrives because it's freezing cold or suffocatingly hot. But I'm a trainer, so I know how to close the majority of the store. Mainly barista, line, and register. That's really the main ones I close, and again, sometimes in the same day. Again, ugh. Now in this location it's a bit different. I still have that person walking by me, that same experience really, and keep this to myself. It's not the same man though, it's a definite to this. At night, when I alone, literally the only left human are 2 or 3, and they are downstairs. You can see where the stairs are at, and if anybody's there and fucking with you. No one's upstairs with me. The soda machine sometimes goes on by itself, and I don't mean the humming noise of machine. No, I mean you can hear someone pressing against the chosen soda, and the noise it makes when it dispenses the sugary liquid. At first, I'm just think it's the machine. Due to being pressed a million times a day, I'm pretty sure a button or 2 will wear out and malfunction here and there. Wishful thinking, I know. Now, this has happened a few times, not consecutively, so I just brush it off. Soda doesn't go all over the place, it's just those taps that allow the soda to go for like a split 2 or 3 seconds. But the part that confirmed my mind was right was when you hear a chair being moved. Now, I'm the only one on the floor. There's the last 1 or 2 downstairs and only 1 staircase that you can't go past without being seen. No one is on the floor in the dining room at all. But you hear a chair adjust like a movement. It comes from random spots in the dining room. You don't see them move since there's dozens of chairs, but you do hear them. One day, I swear I saw someone rush like a dark blur go to the bathroom. Thought it was the manager or the worker that was left, but nobody comes upstairs. I figured maybe I wasn't paying attention and they came up. It could happen since I'm not the brightest person there is. Suddenly, I see my manager coming from the staircase, whether by himself or with the second to last worker downstairs. Besides the old man, there's a shadow person that's in the location. He moves fast, so I'm not sure if that's why I can't see him or if he's just perhaps featureless. Now, I thought it was just me, until one of the new employees had been there for a few weeks and he was closing by himself. After a while, he sat me down as we waited for the ride on the bus. He looked to me and was like, "So how you handling the job so far?" "Blue, I need to ask you something." "Sups. Anything all good?" "Yeah, just the noises sometimes get to me." Me thinking, but keeping to myself about these things, not wanting to send wrong messages. "Oh, those are just the machines, especially the ice machine. Sounds get tricky when you're alone." "It's not the machines, it's the chairs." Now I'm just watching him as he realized my hesitation to say something and look around. I feel him staring at me as if it confirmed it wasn't just the machines, and then he said it. there's an old man that walks around here. Who is he? No one to concern yourself with. You leave them alone, they leave you alone. There's also something else here, but I see the old man here more. Me, just try not to pay attention to him. It'll only make you paranoid at night, and although it might make you work faster into closing the store, don't recommend giving it much thought. We both suddenly hear a chair move as the legs went across the floor for a split second, like I felt it was them saying that we're listening. I'm used to it, but I still jump, and from time to time, too, we soon get up, stand by the door to the store, waiting for our time before we have to leave. He left after a few months for a better job, and I stood there till my injury stopped me from working. But as I said, it was continuous in there, but it still happened on a here and there basis. But I always heard the chairs and the old man. Never looked into the history of the area, nor did I want to. Do enough Nancy drewing around anyways. That is a good use, or it's a good verb form of Nancy Drew. You know what I mean. Halloween night. Okay, so this happened a few years ago in my mother's apartment. Again, alone in the house. And again, I'm not sure where anybody was or went to, and I'm just lying in bed. It was dark outside, so I wasn't sure what time of the night it was. I would say maybe 8 or 11. I was asleep, dreaming of whatever it was I was dreaming. More than likely a weird dream, as all the other dreams were. For some reason, part of me decided to wake up, and as I opened my eyes, something didn't feel right. Now, I know about sleep paralysis, and I've been through this many times. Can't move, can't talk, not sure whether you're still asleep or awake. But this was completely different. The atmosphere didn't feel right. It felt heavy. I heard something, but I wasn't sure what it was since I was just waking up, so I figured either my mother came home or I dropped something. As I was trying to move to sit up, I felt a sudden grip, a tight grip like a predator catching its prey. Now I'm thinking it's paralysis, but then I felt a heavy frame over me like a body pressing against me, trying to hold me down. Suddenly there was a pain in my stomach, like something was putting their knee in my stomach to keep me pinned. More pressure was put into my stomach as I was trying to move, tossed to the side and curl up, and the pain was in one spot. Not all over, just a spot my knee would be. Suddenly I'm hearing some breathing. I don't feel the air, but I can hear it, and I felt a hand on my face, like somebody grabbed my jaw and slowly made my head turn to its side. I'm laying there, moving my arms slowly, but unable to really function it, And then it happened. Whispers were heard into my ear, talking, but at a fast pace. I couldn't catch up to it, but I heard certain words being said. And this time I felt actual breath in my ear. My body still felt heavy from whatever was on me, and my mobility was completely shot. All I could do was breathe and feel, and the pain was getting more intense. Within the whispers, all I heard were demands. It was like listening to a spirit box. You could only hear certain words coming out, all the noise that you were hearing. I don't remember all of the words, but they were pills, take, and bathroom. There was also a few other words that were kind of close to that category. Not sure how long it went for, since I was trying to figure out what, who, or why. Kept squirming on my bed as the whispering continued. Finally, I felt the heaviness disappear off of me. I flung up to sit up on it like a heavy pant and held my stomach where I felt the pressure. Immediately rolled off the bed and looked at it, wondering what the hell just happened. The atmosphere was back to normal. There was no one else in the room, but something said look, and when I looked, my closet door was slightly opened. It's as if you had read my previous entries that you would read, if not closed. Things happen. birthday balloon. Mid to late 90s, my mother bought me a helium balloon that had Belle from Beauty and the Beast on both sides. It was rather big, about the size of a medium sofa cushion, and it was a pretty balloon, and I loved it a lot. Over time, I was enjoying it here and there, till it was just still floating about the house. That's cool, balloons do that, and slowly they sort of fade away from the air. Fine, cool. But I realized something. It would be in every room I was on its own. Didn't think much of it at first, so I'm just ignoring it, but after a while I could catch it floating in my direction little by little. Those were literally following me where I went. It wasn't like a fast or quick pace, but it's at its own pace, and it would follow me. I was in the living room, and it was just chilling in the corner, still in the air floating. Both of us just sitting there. Without thinking, I got up off the sofa and went toward my bedroom to look for something or just go to my room. Within a few minutes, I look up and see the balloon floating at my door as if waiting for me to invite it in. I watched like, what the fuck? And again, not thinking, maybe the air and all, and it went on for days. It took very long for it to lose its air. Whenever I moved, it wasn't too far behind. I'd be in the shower, and when I'd leave, the balloon's at the door like a dog waiting. The balloon was found in rooms that had no explanation on how it got in there. It was like touching the ceiling and had in no way possible be able to pass the door frames without any help. One day it was in my bedroom, fine, whatever. No, not fine. I was in the living room just chilling, and suddenly I see it floating toward the living room in the hallway. Stops at the entrance of the living room, floats toward a corner, and just sits there. I'm alone, so how did it get out of my room to begin with? And after that, I started being petrified of the balloon. Didn't go near it, and I avoided it like you would anyone in the streets. My mom wanted to release the air so the whole thing could be over, but I didn't let her. Not sure why, honestly, but that balloon made me uncomfortable. Even when the air was half gone from it, it still floated around the house like a stepdad. That's when it made it easier to get into rooms, and I'd have to close my damn door to prevent it from entering. The worst days were when I go to sleep and wake up in the morning with a balloon hovering over me or by my bed. Finally, the damn thing died off, and I think my mom folded it up and either threw it away or put it away for a keepsake. No more birthday balloons. And if I do get them, I undo them at the end of the day. When I was 8, I had my first paranormal experience. First encounter was with my stepfather at that time. My mother and my brother were just living in a rented house of a suicide victim. Of course, they didn't told my mom or my stepfather about it when they first rented, but the neighbors did told us after a month of living there. So at first, everything's fine, only an odd feeling about the garage. The dead forest behind the house. And when I say dead forest, I mean like a straight line of dead trees that just keeps going for miles. But when you look to the left and to the right of the house, the rest of the forest was green and luscious. Anyways, my mom was working at night, so we would be with her boyfriend from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. During the daylight, we kept seeing black shadows going by the corner of our eyes. But you'd look, and nothing was there until me and my brother saw it on the floor going up to the attic. But it wasn't really an attic, more like an empty space in between the roof and the house. One night everything was shaking, like as if there was a huge storm outside the windows and the door was shaking, and then the TV went static and my brother went catatonic. I was faced with my stepfather looking at me with the creepiest smile I've ever seen. He said to me that the banging I was hearing was monsters trying to get in and that we'd get eaten alive. He was just going to say weird stuff to scare me with the blackest of eyes. It's like his pupil was so huge and he was another person, like telling the story about those monsters outside. And I'm going to sound crazy, but at one point I saw a wolf-like figure with the red eyes at the door of the patio transforming into a man, like a black figure with yellowish eyes. I was so scared I can't believe I didn't pass out or something. Like I kept looking back at my brother and calling his name, but he had no response, only dead staring at the static of the TV looking like a total zombie. Meanwhile, the doors and windows were still shaking and banging. There's no storms outside, no wind, no nothing. The trees weren't even moving outside the windows. But then after what felt like a real-life nightmare that I couldn't wake from, I remember I looked back at my stepfather and saw 3 white female figures. They were all standing behind him, looking at me with a smile that I can't explain. But I felt like they were saying to me that you're safe and you're not alone. I felt this courage overcome the fear, then grabbed the arm of my stepfather. I yelled at him to stop it now. Looking straight back into those black eyes, seeing the pupil shrinking back to normal in a matter of seconds, like whatever was happening in him was gone, poofed. And suddenly I was face to face with the scared and panicked grown man that kept asking me what had happened. Seeing that I was in tears and my brother was white looking dead on the couch, TV went back to normal, no more banging, everything had stopped suddenly. I asked him if we could leave the house for the night until my mom comes back. He then took the keys of the car and we stayed in the car for a couple of streets away from the house and waited for my mom to come back in the early morning. I was confused and I was mad at him. Didn't want to speak to him. I told him everything to my mom, and the next day the following week we were moving from that house and leaving him behind. But apparently my mom told me after he had summoned a demon with one of his friends a couple of months prior. Well, and apparently he was having suicidal thoughts and losing parts of his days that he couldn't remember. He felt like he was going crazy, and with the reasons he was getting pretty scared. They even went to a priest. Anyway, that's the end of the story of my first encounter with the paranormal. I have a few others that happened to me. I got scared and prayed to never see or hear anything ever again. Kind of, well, to be as oblivious as possible to the paranormal. Never saw or heard or feel anything in years. The Man in Black. When I was 10 years old, I'm sleeping over at my friend's apartment in the same apartment complex as me. It was a late summer night when I suddenly woke up not feeling quite good for some reason. So I went to the window to breathe in some air, and just thinking it was probably a nightmare that I couldn't remember, which is, well, kind of weird to me, but I usually always do. But anyways, my friends are dead asleep in the same room as me, and I'm at the window. First, I look around at the top of the trees in the sky. My eyes go down toward the street in front of me. Then I see a man all dressed in black with a black ski mask that only shows his eyes staring right up at our window, staring at me. He's not moving a finger, just staring there looking at me. I wake up my friends telling them to look down the street, which they immediately did, but now I had my friends looking back at me like I was crazy, saying to me that they couldn't see anything, there's no one. And mind you, at this point I'm just crying and hysterically telling them that he's right there in front of them, but they couldn't see him. They eventually went and woke up the 17-year-old, so hopefully that way she could come and try to calm me down, and after a while went back to sleep. And that was the end of it. Never saw anything else like that. And by the way, I'm not schizophrenic at all, and I had a shrink when I was 14, and that was for social anxiety. And it's because of the moving so much. So to this day, I'm quite confused about that night that I saw. And I'm curious to know really if anybody's experienced something like that. Scratching and knocking at my door at 3 a.m. Just to preface, about 3 years ago is when I had this paranormal experience. It happened in July of 2016. I'm a night owl, and I've always had a hard time going to bed at a reasonable hour since childhood, especially during this period of my life. I was near the end of a very bad time in my life where I was hospitalized for a year due to mental health issues. because I had no job at the time. I often stayed up as late as I liked and worked on projects, sometimes even till dawn. I liked the comfort, and all the night pretty much brought me all this and brought me the quietness of it all. Really enjoyed being the only one awake, and never once considered that it could be scary. I was used to it. At this time, I wasn't sure about the paranormal, even though I had some experiences in the past. It was something I never really thought much about. I wouldn't say I didn't believe in it entirely, but I was very skeptical. So I still lived with my parents. My mom often got up during the night to check on me, even though it always annoyed me a bit. I understood that she was just worried about me because of my mental illness issues. She would tell me that it's late and I need to sleep. She slowly stopped doing it after a while because she realized there's no point, and I went to bed when I wanted to. I was also doing a lot better at this point mentally and was much more stable. And I was starting a new job next week. So back to that night. It was around 3:30 a.m. and I was awake in my room drawing and watching Netflix. I had my door shut and I was just about to turn the lights off to go to sleep. I figured I should at least try to lay down and sleep even though I really wasn't tired. As I was putting my colored pencils away and turning off Netflix, I heard something knock on my door really loudly. It did this 3 times and sounded like something was scratching the door along with it. Expecting it to be my mom asking me why I was still up, I replied, "Yeah?" But no one answered. And then I heard 3 loud knocks and scratching noises again. Scratching sounded like someone's nails running down from the top of the door, and I said, "Yeah, what is it? What do you want?" No one answered again. So I started thinking that whoever was knocking on my door was trying to scare me. It didn't make any sense. Why my family would be trying to scare me? They had all been passed out for hours and not the type to do something like that at 3 in the morning. Then it happened again. And this time I was like, "Hello, hello." Silence again. I even for a split second thought that maybe it was my dog, just trying to get into my room. But just as quickly debunking that idea. My dog couldn't get upstairs where the bedrooms are because we had it locked. There's a heavy-duty gate that blocked the top of the stairs. He's a little dog too and can't get over it. The knocking and scratching was so deliberate and with such force that there was no way it was my dog. Rattling my doors it happened. It was always done in the same pattern as the knock before, just like a person would do. Then it happened one last time. I didn't say anything this time, and I suddenly realized how bizarre this was. I had this, intense feeling of fear washing over me. I was too scared to open my door to check and see if everything was there, and I felt like if I did, something would harm me. My instinct told me that I'd be inviting whatever this thing was into my room if I did. I sat on my bed for maybe 15 minutes staring at the door in pure shock. Finally had the courage to get up and turn off the lights. And I kept my lamp on that still lit up the whole room. There's no way I was sleeping in the dark. I texted my boyfriend 30 minutes after the incident, telling him what just happened. He works early in the morning, so he responded right away, telling me not to investigate any further and to try to sleep. I barely slept any. After what was just happening, I was like the first person up in the morning. I told everyone what happened and no one took me seriously. They said I must have imagined it because I was really tired or something, but I didn't. I was wide awake and lucid. I asked everybody if they knocked on my door and none of them did. I thought for sure somebody at least heard it too, because seemingly something demonic or scratching, the sound was loud as hell. Pun intended. They said no, and I knew that they were not lying. My dog was still downstairs where we left him the night before, and this freaked me out a lot. And stopped thinking about it because I couldn't explain it. I tried thinking of a rational explanation, but came up with nothing. After this is when I started to become very interested in the paranormal. Did lots of research and was looking for answers. A month later, I got together my own paranormal investigation team, began doing my own investigations. Since then, I've had many encounters with the supernatural, and captured evidence of weird happenings, visual and audio. Everybody with me also would experience these things. But those are stories for another day. Even after 3 years, this is something that I think about sometimes. I wonder if it was demonic or just a spirit with a message. I asked a friend whose psychic abilities I've seen amazing evidence of recently. She said it was a visitor. I know this kind of phenomenon has happened to many, especially at the witching hour, being 3 a.m. I know many say that 3 knocks on the hour means mocking the Trinity, which means it's a demon, but I'm not sure. Even though the creepiest fucking nail scratching is pretty convincing. But there's much more symbolism to the number 3 than just that. I gotta stop knocking in 3s, apparently. Damn. Oops. Shape-shifting spirit in the forest. Friend is attacked. So there's an infamous apparition that appears at the head of the trail. It usually happens around sunset. Many have reported seeing a man wearing 70s clothing at the top of the cliff staring down at you. Then he runs at an impossible angle down the cliff with a smile on his face. And just as he's about to hit the trail, he vanishes into thin air. It's been seen for decades. Many police calls have been made because of it. Law enforcement is aware of this phenomenon and are told to ignore it. Many people believed it was a real person. There's also a mine that collapsed up there, killing many. Lots of rock climbers have fallen to their death. There's been black magic rituals there. Many hikers and people have gone missing. And also, Ted Bundy killed someone up there as well. The battle at Fork, Utah took place there. Many natives and Mormon settlers were slaughtered. Not to mention it's known for Bigfoot sightings and other weird shape-shifting shit. The canyon is full of spirits and activity. You're bound to at least experience something. Even if you just get a mild sort of sense of being watched or just the quote-unquote creeps. I've hiked up there many times before. I even knew it was haunted, just because it's one of the most beautiful canyons in Utah County. Every time I went, I would feel very paranoid once I got deep into the canyon, though. One of these times, I was with 2 friends and their 2 dogs. We had made it pretty far, and I've been hiking for hours at this point. The sun was setting. We decided to take a water break. As soon as we stopped, we heard loud whooshing and banging noises coming from the left of the trail of trees. My friend's dogs immediately bolted down the trail with the hair standing up on their backs. The sound was not like anything we'd heard before. We thought it could be an animal, and maybe it was, but I don't know what kind of animal could make that noise. Can't describe it, but I still remember exactly how it sounded. The closest thing I can think of to the sound is a very large drum. I felt a strong urge to get the fuck out of there, and so did everyone else. Needless to say, we didn't finish the hike that day. After that experience, I did some research on the canyon and found out about the hauntings. This sort of triggered a curiosity to explore this. So I round up the gang of ghost hunters and we decided to go on a Friday. We decided to go at sunset, packed lots of ghost hunting gear, and set off preparing to hike in the dark. We have a ghost device that's always been accurate in our investigations, and we use this throughout this whole experience. It has an EMF detector and a radar. It's the most useful device, and we got one. And it repeats words off the EVP, and it shows it spelled out into the screen. So as soon as we were 5 minutes up the trail, We all collectively agreed that we all felt more energy from the left side of the canyon, so we decided to take the left fork and we would just go to it. One of the first things the device said was 3. It repeated it many times throughout the hike. We assumed it was answering our question about how many spirits were there at first. The device detected many energy points on the radar as soon as the sun went down. Weird chains, humming, whistling, clanking noises throughout the whole hike. It always was coming from the left side of the canyon, and it seemed to be following us. We finally arrived in one mining cave in the trail. Put the flashlight in the mouth of the cave and noticed this particular cave is kind of sunk halfway into the ground. So you basically have to crawl into a hole that goes underground. It's a very tight squeeze and barely one person can go in at a time. One of our group members, Brian, decided he was going to try to look down for a second. We all had a very bad feeling about it, protested against it, and he insisted and we just were going to go down for a second. Radar was going off and it was showing a lot of strong activity coming from the cave's direction. Brian kneeled down and started to climb in. As soon as he got one leg in the hole of the cave, the device immediately said leg. We told Brian to stop and step away. He finally listened. We decided to stop and record an EVP session at the mouth of the cave. We were hearing the same distant voices and clanking, too, as we did before, but this time a bit louder. We set the voice recorder in the ground and started asking questions. We weren't getting much response, but the noises continued. We were huddled around the voice recorder when I heard whispering right behind my head. It felt like somebody was breathing down my neck. Everyone heard it and decided to end the recording. We all contemplated turning around and leaving, but Jenny and Brian insisted on going further. We decided, since we made it this far, we might as well keep going. We hadn't seen anyone else on the trail for hours. That's when we finally saw some BYU college students hiking back down as they passed us. As soon as they were approaching us, the activity on the radar and device disappeared instantly. It was almost like the spirits didn't want them to know that they were there. So we passed all these different bridges labeled with a number. Every bridge we passed, the activity and energy increased, as did the noises. One of my friends in our group, Jenny, has some psychic abilities, and she sees spirits ever since she flatlined in a hospital years ago. She had always been pretty good at sort of steering us in the right direction. She seems to know things before they happen. She mentioned to us that there were spirit guides with us protecting us the whole time, and was possibly warning us of something. We didn't think much of it at first, and then we passed bridge number 3. As soon as we did, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. It was a hot summer night and we were sweating the entire hike. And then we all were just putting on our jackets. And also was immediately a very bad, pungent, rotting smell and the sound of water, even though we were by a dry riverbed. We got to the part of the trail where the path narrows and it goes into a thick forested area. It was dark the whole trip, but we could see some without the flashlights because of the moon. But this area has thick trees blocking the moonlight. You could barely see 15 feet in front of you even with the flashlight. Everything inside me was telling me not to keep walking. My friend Kayla agreed. We stopped maybe a minute or two to talk, and everyone was huddled into a circle, except Jenny. She was looking in the distance up the riverbed. We were thinking about turning around because we began to all feel very unsafe and a sense of doom. As we were talking about leaving, the device said, "Go," and big. As soon as we heard that, we booked it down the trail. My heart felt like it was going to fall out of my chest. Running as fast as we could, and it felt like somebody was chasing us. Finally, after passing all the bridges, we finally slowed down just because we were out of breath. We all sighed a breath of relief. We felt safer as soon as we crossed the bridge once, or the bridge once again. We were all laughing about what happened, and we were making jokes to lighten the mood. Jenny then told us sternly to not let our guard down. She said we still have a way to go. She told Brian to shine a light behind us the rest of the way because we were being followed. We were hoping the light would push back whatever was there. We were walking back for maybe 10 minutes when suddenly, my friend Kayla began seizing and shaking. Her entire right side of her body was moving uncontrollably. She was using her left arm to try to stop her right arm from spasming. She was hyperventilating, and Jenny put her arm just around her, and we stopped her and let her calm down. We heard humming all around us. Eventually, she went back to normal. Still in complete shock, and we're walking as fast as we can down that trail. Then the device said protect, and the radar showed a circle around us forming all these dots of energy. It was super cool. We felt safe for a while. Then 30 minutes later, we started hearing louder noises. Jenny told us all to just ignore them and think of something positive. She told to picture a cute little bunny with brown eyes instead. We all joked about it. And then about 3 minutes later, something was rustling the bushes, and then out jumps a bunny with brown eyes in the center of the trail. As soon as it hit the ground, the device said intruder. I don't think about this coincidence until we reached the bottom. I do recall us thinking it was weird because it looked like a domesticated rabbit in the woods. Kayla was not doing well, was feeling sick and weak. Made it to the end of the trail and decided to do a protective ritual after the device said protect again. Before we turned off the device, we were talking about what could have attacked Kayla. That's when the device said monster. We ended our session and decided to take Kayla home and make sure she was safe. She was still very shaken up. I talked to Jenny the next day and asked her what she was looking at, and we were all huddled in a circle talking about the riverbed. She said that she was 4 spirits. 2 were benign, 1 was evil, and 1 was something that she never felt before. She saw something attack Kayla when she started seizing. She believes it was the last one. Jenny and Brian also brought up the weird connection to the bunny. We thought about it that way. They believed it to be a shapeshifter and possibly the unexplainable entity that attacked Kayla. Kayla still had many problems afterwards. We eventually put a spell on her house to protect her, and the issues finally subsided. The reason why I'm retelling this story is because I finally watched the movie The Witch on Netflix after many people told me it was good. It's been more than a year since that experience, but when I watched that movie, there was a shape-shifting rabbit in it. It made me do a little bit more research on maybe what happened that night, and I came across many sources claiming this is a phenomenon that happens everywhere. Apparently, there's a shapeshifter known to take the form of a rabbit called puka. Native Americans are aware of this kind of shapeshifter, and I believe it to be a connection to the underworld. Many believe that one of the other forms it takes is a beautiful young woman that walks through the woods. I promised to never speak of it again, but what the fuck happened? Prior to this incident, I've never experienced anything remotely paranormal. This is one of the reasons why I never truly spoke of what I went through at the time. Being in denial was easier than me trying to understand something that I couldn't rationally grasp. It all started with me moving in with 2 other girls into a dormitory in the capital of my country. The dorm was exclusively for female students, and it had 3 major blocks. It's owned by the Ministry of Higher Education and is considered public housing facility for people who do not want to or cannot afford to rent private apartments housing. We were given at random a room in the lowest block of the building, Block C. The room we were given was numbered 903, and it was the room before the last in order of rooms in the block. At the beginning, none of us were suspicious of anything, although we did notice the shape of a visible handprint in the front of the door. Handprint looked tiny, like that of a small child. We didn't give it much thought, and we concluded that it must have been maybe left from a previous paint coat on the door, and that was only the beginning of it all. As time went by and the school year rolled in, each of us started to notice little strange things happening around the room. It was small things like putting stuff in a certain place and finding it somewhere else. For so long, we kept thinking that we were just being forgetful and we're not paying as much attention as we should. Maybe it's due to school stress, exams and such. However, that changed for me when I started to experience things differently. The first true incident that made me start to question everything was when I was in the shower. This room had a tiny shower, a small toilet, and a kitchen sink attached to it. Between the main and bigger part of the room, the beds and the desk and the shower, was the door. The door has a latch on it that you can turn left or right to lock and unlock. I was by myself that day and both my roommates were out. It was close to mid-afternoon. I came back from college and wanted to take a shower before taking a nap. Gathered towels and shampoo and made sure to close the windows. Then I went into the shower, leaving the door unlocked and wide open. I was alone, so I didn't feel the need to lock or close the shower's door. I started up the shower's head and started opening the shampoo bottle when suddenly, and out of nowhere, the door to the shower shut so violently that the whole room actually shook. I heard the moment the latch on the door as if it turned right to lock me in. I was so startled that I almost hit my head on the floor of the shower. I shouted out because I thought I was maybe having one of my roommates coming home early and not realizing I was in there. Kept calling for the girls and telling them to unlock the door and that it was not funny. The door wouldn't budge and the lock remained firmly on. At some point I started to get seriously uneasy. And it's because if nobody was going to open up the lock from the other side, I essentially was trapped in the shower. I kept banging on the door until my neighbor in the next room heard me. Came around to talk me through the wall. She came around and talked to me through the wall of her shower. The shower and toilets were built in a way that they aligned with those of the adjacent rooms. She asked me if I was all right, and I told her I was not, and that I was locked in and I needed to get out. So she called out of the dorm. I brought a spare key to open up my room and unlock the shower's door so I could be let out. I was literally shaking, and the dorm's head just kept asking if I needed medical care. They gently laid me on my bed, and within that sort of commotion, it occurred to me that the room was empty. None of my roommates were there. I was so traumatized that I didn't even want to entertain the thought of what actually happened. I've always been terrified of small places, and I being forcefully locked into one almost caused me to lose consciousness. When the girls came after sunset, they were so concerned for me, and they swore up and down that they haven't returned to dorms until that very moment. As I calmed down, I started to go back into my mind, checking over things like the facts of the front door to the room being locked. I actually closed the windows as well before getting into the shower to not get a cold. I was losing my mind, going back and forth at what happened like thousands of times in my head, and I heard the door slam and I heard the lock turn. I did not imagine those things. Then how the fuck did I get locked in if no one else was on the other side of the door? It's after that when things started to get creepy and way too uncomfortable for me. After the whole thing, I sat down with my roommates and told them what I went through. Told them to tell me if I was going insane or something's wrong with me. And at that moment, they opened up to me about weird stuff that they've also been experiencing. One of them spoke of how she was repeatedly feeling the sensation of a cold breath over her neck while she slept or napped. She told us that she was losing sleep because of it, but was scared to mention it really, and the other spoke of voices she would hear at random times and shadows dancing on the walls during both day and nighttime. We tried to rationalize what we were experiencing, but it just didn't reassure us in any way or form. Started staying out as long as we can just so that way we could spend time in the room as possible, or rather as little time as possible. I even stayed at a friend's apartment a couple of nights because I couldn't stomach sleeping in that room again. things did not get any better, and in fact, it got worse after that. And this is me recalling the most terrifying night of my life. I promised to never speak of it again, but what the fuck happened? Prior to this incident, I've never experienced anything remotely paranormal, so this is one of the reasons why I never truly spoke of what I went through at the time. Being in denial was easier than me trying to understand something that I couldn't rationally grasp. It all started with me moving in with 2 other girls into a dormitory in the capital of my country. The dorm was exclusively for female students, and it had 3 major blocks. It's owned by the Ministry of Higher Education and is considered a public housing facility for people who do not want to or cannot afford to rent private apartments housing. We were given at random a room in the lowest block of the building, Block C. The room we were given was numbered 903, and it was the room before the last in order of rooms in the block. At the beginning, none of us were suspicious of anything, although we did notice the shape of a visible handprint in the front of the door. The handprint looked tiny, like that of a small child. We didn't give it much thought, and we concluded that it must have been maybe left from a previous paint coat on the door, and that was only the beginning of it all. As time went by and the school year rolled in, each of us started to notice little strange things happening around the room. It was small things like putting stuff in a certain place and finding it somewhere else. For so long, we kept thinking that we were just being forgetful and we're not paying as much attention as we should. Maybe it's due to school stress, exams, and such. However, that changed for me when I started to experience things differently. The first true incident that made me start to question everything was when I was in the shower. This room had a tiny shower, a small toilet, and a kitchen sink attached to it. Between the main and bigger part of the room, the beds and the desk and the shower, was the door. The door has a latch on it that you can turn left or right to lock and unlock. I was by myself that day, and both my roommates were out. It was close to mid-afternoon. I came back from college and wanted to take a shower before taking a nap. Gathered towels and shampoo and made sure to close the windows. Then I went into the shower, leaving the door unlocked and wide open. I was alone, so I didn't feel the need to lock or close the shower's door. I started up the shower's head and started opening the shampoo bottle when suddenly, and out of nowhere, the door to the shower shut so violently that the whole room actually shook. I heard the moment the latch on the door as if it turned right to lock me in. I was so startled that I almost hit my head on the floor of the shower. I shouted out because I thought I was maybe having one of my roommates coming home early and not realizing I was in there. Kept calling for the girls and telling them to unlock the door and that it was not funny. The door wouldn't budge and the lock remained firmly on. At some point I started to get seriously uneasy. And it's because if nobody was going to open up the lock from the other side, I essentially was trapped in the shower. I kept banging on the door until my neighbor in the next room heard me. Came around to talk me through the wall. She came around and talked to me through the wall of her shower. The shower and toilets were built in a way that they aligned with those of the adjacent rooms. She asked me if I was alright, and I told her I was not, and that I was locked in and I needed to get out. So she called the head of the dorm. They brought a spare key to open up my room and unlock the shower's door so I could be let out. I was literally shaking, and the dorm's head just kept asking if I needed medical care. They gently laid me on my bed, and within that sort of commotion, it occurred to me that the room was empty. None of my roommates were there. I was so traumatized that I didn't even want to entertain the thought of what actually happened. I've always been terrified of small places, and I being forcefully locked into one almost caused me to lose consciousness. When the girls came after sunset, they were so concerned for me, and they swore up and down that they haven't returned to dorms until that very moment. As I calmed down, I started to go back into my mind, checking over things like the facts of the front door to the room being locked. I actually closed the windows as well before getting into the shower and not get a cold. I was losing my mind, going back and forth at what happened like thousands of times in my head, and I heard the door slam and I heard the lock turn. I did not imagine those things. Then how the fuck did I get locked in if no one else was on the other side of the door? It's after that when things started to get creepy and way too uncomfortable for me. After the whole thing, I sat down with my roommates and told them what I went through. Told them to tell me if I was going insane or if something's wrong with me. And at that moment, they opened up to me about weird stuff that they've also been experiencing. One of them spoke of how she was repeatedly feeling the sensation of a cold breath over her neck while she slept or napped. She told us that she was losing sleep because of it, but was scared to mention it really, and the other spoke of voices she would hear at random times and shadows dancing on the walls during both day and nighttime. We tried to rationalize what we were experiencing, but it just didn't reassure us in any way or form. Started staying out as long as we can, just so that way we could spend time in the room as possible, or rather as little time as possible. I even stayed at a friend's apartment a couple of nights because I couldn't stomach sleeping in that room again. Things did not get any better, and in fact, it got worse after that. And this is me recalling the most terrifying night of my life. So we're all asleep in the room when I suddenly woke up. I had no pressing need to pee, and I wasn't hungry or thirsty. I was just startled awake for no immediate reason. It was around 1 a.m. because I do remember checking my phone. Moonlight was strong, and it was a pretty bright night. Laid my head back into the pillow, eyes still open, trying to relax back to sleep when I noticed something moving on the wall. At first, I thought it was a shadow of something in the room or in the balcony, but it was not. It was a shadow of a human child holding something in its hands. It kept moving back up and down the wall like it was running or playing around. I legitimately froze. I instantly tried to block my breathing. My heart was beating like crazy that I could hear it drumming like frantically in my ears. It was like I was my entire body, like made of wood. I swear I've never felt more scared or anxious in my life. Weirdest feeling ever, no words can properly describe it. All I could think was, am I going crazy? There's no way I'm seeing what I'm seeing. Nope. I'm totally still asleep and I'm dreaming. And I'll wake up now soon. Just a dream, just a dream. The shadow stopped and suddenly turned in my direction. And in a perfect crystal clear voice, a giggling young girl spoke up to me saying, "Come play with me." I almost had a heart attack at that moment. I don't know how I did it, but I sprang up from the bed like a crazy person and started violently shaking my roommate awake. Told them that I'm not going to stay in this room for a moment longer, that I didn't care if I had to sleep in a mattress in the hallway outside. They were confused and they were worried and half awake, and I didn't care to linger. Just gathered my pillow and blanket and left. Went to a friend in another room in the building and spent the night with them. Next morning, skipped class, went to the dorm's head and told her to find me in an open spot in another room. Hopefully I didn't care about in what block and with whom, but that day I went into the cursed room, packed all my stuff, moved in with one of my roommates to a different room in the furthest block possible. The other roommate told me that she couldn't leave because there weren't enough empty spots for other rooms and that she's fine with staying. I told her to just knock herself out, but I'm never stepping a foot in that room ever again. And yes, I never went back there. The following year, I rented a house with the same roommate that left me with all the way at the end. The following year, I rented a house with the same roommate that left with me that day. We never spoke again of the shit that happened in that dorm room ever again. Never been in a dorm room. Ghosts or no ghosts, don't really want to go to a dorm room. Sweet dreams. The last knock. This happened at a public university in Malaysia. Not one that You remember exactly. It was many years ago during freshman orientation week, in the quiet girls' hostel block. And one new student had been assigned to a double room, but for some reason no roommate ever arrived. During the orientation, the seniors gave a strange warning. If someone knocks on your door late at night, do not open it, no matter what you hear. When the juniors asked why, the seniors told a chilling story. Years earlier, a senior living in that very block had quarreled with her boyfriend over the phone. Heartbroken, she wandered the hall after midnight. She was knocking on every door and begging for someone to talk to, and everyone was asleep and no one opened. Desperate and alone, she climbed to the top floor and jumped. And since that night, at that exact hour of her death, unexplained knocking begins at the first room in the corridor and travels slowly door by door. A soft, sad voice follows. Is anyone willing to talk to me? The new girl tried to laugh it off, but as darkness fell, her courage shrank. Midnight crept closer. When the distant knocking started, she froze room by room. The sound approached with 2 knocks. Then the faint, pleading voice trailing behind. And by the time it reached the room next to her, she was trembling and panicked. She slid under her bed and pulled the blanket tight. Then the knocking came, and it was soft and deliberate on her door. She held her breath, expecting to hear the question. Instead, a whisper slipped through the crack, and I finally found somebody to talk to, she said, and the girl fainted. Later, she learned the gruesome detail the seniors had left out. When that heartbroken student leapt, her head struck the ground first, and in death, she wandered upside down, her head dragging across the floor, the legs swaying above. The terrified freshman had hidden under the bed, and one perfectly placed person was visible as something that walked with its head to the ground. Whispers in the tall-walled flat. When my mother was a teenager, she lived in a weathered block of flats in Beddock South. It's a place that locals whispered about but rarely explained. The rent was absurdly cheap, which should have been the first warning. Her room faced the narrow kitchen, and at night, after the lights went out, the silence never lasted. Instead came the clamor, like a hawker's center suddenly sprung to life in darkness. Pots clanged and chairs scraped, and faint chatter rose and fell. Terrified, she buried her face in the pillow, afraid to even peek. And night after night, she went to the sheets because the bathroom felt impossibly far and dangerous. The bathroom itself was strange. Its walls soared well above a man's reach and built high to stop prying eyes. Yet one humid evening, as she reached to untie her hair, a shadow loomed above the rim. The man's face stared back, and she shrieked and bolted. No ordinary human could have scaled those walls. And my mother was a skilled sketcher, a drawer. And one rainy afternoon, she carefully drew pictures of Cinderella instead of Snow White. Delicate gown, bright glass slippers. But when she left her desk, the faintest rustle drew her back. The penciled head of Cinderella trembled and slid halfway off the page, as if trying to escape. My uncle, wondering in that moment, took one look and fainted clean away. And as if that weren't enough, my mother often glimpsed a woman in a crimson cheongsam, drifting through the flat at exactly midnight. The figure never looked at her, but the air grew icy whenever it passed. Years later, when the building was marked for demolition, she overheard their neighbors, the transplants from upstairs, murmuring, "Good thing this place will be torn down soon." Ever since that newlywed tragedy, nothing's been right. Puzzled, my grandmother asked for the story and spilled out in low voices. The young bride had discovered her husband's affair. Rage and heartbreak drove her to kill him before ending her own life in the very flat my mother now feared. And suddenly everything, the phantom market noise, the red-dressed specter, the impossible peeping figure, even the restless drawing, they fit together like jagged puzzle pieces. When the moving truck finally rumbled away and the flat stood empty behind them, my mother swore she felt eyes watching to the last turn on the road. The old bike was gone within months, but its stories, like faint voices behind a tall wall, never truly left. The fireballed Block 783C. This happened to my family at our flat in Woodlands, Block 783C. We've been living there since 2000. The moment stuck with me was 2004. One morning around 5:30 or 6, I went out to the service balcony to fetch the plastic bags I used for wet canoeing gear after training. Our service balcony windows have metal Venetian blinds, and every night before 7 p.m. we always close and lock the windows and pull the blinds down. I walked to the balcony, reached for the bag, and without warning, the blinds suddenly rose and fell by themselves. I froze and turned and ran straight into my mother's room. My sister saw me out of breath and asked what was wrong and just said nothing. That same evening around 9, my aunt was hanging laundry on the service balcony. Saw my mother and younger sister watch TV in the family room. My aunt noticed the blinds moving again, like somebody was flicking them. Thinking nothing of it at first, she flipped one of the slats back, and immediately a ball of light, like a small, fast fireball, shot through the balcony across the kitchen, went through the family room where my mother and sister were watching, and out the living room window. And just as it left the house, it exploded outside. My aunt cried out a short prayer loudly. My mother and sister saw the thing pass through and burst outside the window. That night, my older sisters and I were at her cousin's place, which is one floor above us. And around 9:30, we came back and my mother asked if we had heard a loud bang. We hadn't. She described what happened. I told her about the blinds that morning. When my father came home from work, we told him everything. He called a friend who knows a medium and asked him to come the next day. The medium arrived the following night. He walked slowly through the flat and around the outside, listening and watching. And after a while, he told us not to be afraid, and he said the spirits were just playing, and the fireball was one of their favorite tricks. He assured us they were not dangerous, and couldn't enter our home because my father had asked him to put up a spiritual gate around the flat during the ritual. He also said that there were other spirits nearby, but they too could not come inside. Even though my family had seen strange things before, that first-hand experience is something I'll never forget. We did have a bit of hot happening since we moved into the block, and yeah, we still live there now. But that night with the blinds and the fireball is the one that stays with me. The horned thing in the moonlight. My old flat felt haunted long before I moved out, and for years I'd catch glimpses of things that didn't belong. A plate sliding across the kitchen counter by itself, a cold pressure in my chest while I drifted off. Lights that winked on and off, no one knew the switch. Told myself it was exhaustion until the night that proved otherwise. It was late and the apartment was quiet, and I was in the small master room. The bed was pushed against the wall, so my head faced the ensuite shower, whose frosted glass door had been left ajar. The bathroom seemed oddly brighter than the rest of the room, a pale rectangle of moonlight bleeding through the grab, and my cat, a usually placid gray who always slept curled at my feet, was sitting bolt upright by the bedroom door. Ears were pricked, and that was new. I closed my eyes anyway. Sleep came slow and slippery. I was halfway between waking and dreaming when the cat leapt to its feet and began to yowl. Claws were scrabbling at the door as if something was outside trying to drag it away. I wanted to get up and let it out, but my body wouldn't obey, and my mind was wide awake and my limbs were not. I lay pinned and useless, eyes half open and watching. Behind the frosted glass, something moved. At first, it was just a darker smudge, and then it lengthened and thickened like ink dropping into water. And a silhouette pushed against the gap, too tall and too broad, and my vision narrowed to that shape. My heart hammered so hard I thought the floor would shake. There were horns. 2 great curved horns stood above a head that was wrong for the rest of the form. Bovine, blunt, and terrible. The shoulders and chest that followed were human enough to be monstrous and massive. Corded, trying to force his way through the door into my room. My cat's yowling jumped into hysteria I'd never heard before. I felt panic rise like a tide. Tried to move and to run or to flinch. My body stayed rooted, and after what felt like an age, I managed to break free whatever held me. I scrambled up, flicked on the light, and the room was painfully, completely ordinary. The cat blinked at me and settled as if nothing had happened. I told myself it was a dream, a hypnagogic hallucination born of fatigue and fear, but the image stuck, and the unmistakable profile of a minotaur, bull's head, human torso, horns cutting the moonlight. I had seen the creature in the films and read the myth, dismissed it as a legend. That night, I had to use my bathroom as its doorway.
Step into the mystical realm with Paranormal M. Our stories will make you question the boundaries of possibility. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to experience the latest mind-altering tales. Ask Reddit. Once when I was about 9 years old, it was late at night. I'm asleep in my room, and my younger sister, who's 8, is asleep down the hall in her room. It's not uncommon for us to run into each other's rooms if we have a nightmare. You know that whole trying to outrun the demons? Just run into the other's bed? Well, this night, I literally woke up out of a dead sleep. It's dark, the moon is high outside my window, and my sister is standing in my doorway. It's not debatable that it's her. Her height, her stupid haircut, down to the New Kids on the Block oversized t-shirt nightgown from my mom's youth. But she's just standing there. One hand on the doorknob, other hand on the doorframe, staring at me, silent. I look at her for a minute, and then, just kind of annoyed, I throw my blanket open. "Come on, if you're coming in here." She doesn't move, doesn't say anything. She's still staring. And I'm not even creeped out at this point. I'm just annoyed and sleepy and white trash. So I get up to go hit her. I know, it's a garbage pail kid kind of thing to do, but I'm just being honest. Our parents didn't teach us self-regulation. It is what it is. Better now. I jump out and stomp over to where she is and stop at arm's length in front of her. She's still silent, still staring. Now, I'm a little bit creeped out at this point. "What are you doing?" And I swipe at her overhand. She disappears as my hand falls. Not like dissipates into nothing, like straight up is just gone. I look back at my bed. I look in the hallway. Nothing. So now I run to her room down the hall because it's that time. Nightmare time. Zoom, jump, wrestle into her covers. And when I get there, I notice that she's there, thank God. But she's shaking violently. She's having a fucking seizure. So then I go into a full tilt alarm, run to my parents' room, turn on all the lights, yelling that my sister's having a seizure. We go to the emergency room, and she gets her diagnosis of childhood epilepsy. I also didn't even know what a seizure was when I started yelling about this, which was also weird. I honestly think to this day that she astral projected or something. That bitch found a way to come get me because she was in trouble in her bed. Ask Reddit 2. My mom is usually away from home quite often, and when I was younger, like 10 or 15 years old, she would make me stay over at my grand's house. My grand's house is extremely old, 300 years old in fact, and the interior is very old-fashioned. Entering it always gave me a sinister feel. It wasn't just me being scared of the dark or anything, because I'd still have this fear even during the day. The house is quite large, well, huge in my opinion, and with quite a lot of land attached. My gran has had her heating system redone many times, as the house for some reason never ever even heats up. She eventually gave up and uses a gas fire thing. There's no Wi-Fi in the house, only in the kitchen, which my granddad built as an extension when they moved there. The kitchen is the only place in the house that feels safe. The rest of the house, the walls are too thick for Wi-Fi to reach, which is why it's only in the kitchen. I think anyway, but this means I don't have access to the internet, and my phone is pretty much useless in the rest of the house, because there's also no reception. Anyway, I'd stay there usually every weekend and sometimes during the weekdays. I had my own large room, too. I am an active sleeper, meaning I often sleep talk, but I very rarely sleepwalked, until I started sleeping there. I'd often find myself waking up downstairs in my grandfather's chair, or in the fancy sitting room in the back of the house at like 1 to 4 a.m. I had no recollection of going there, so obviously I sleepwalked, but I didn't even remember falling asleep. I always had a tough time sleeping in my grand's, as I just have a fight or flight instinct constantly stopping me from sleeping. But then I'd wake up in a different room with no memory of where I had slept or anything. The scary thing is, there are no street lamps nearby, so the house would be pitch black, and it would be so cold that my phone would die from the cold. So I'd usually have no light source, and I'd wander back upstairs stumbling in the dark. When trying to fall asleep, I'd always hear strange sounds, and it wasn't just me. My mom used to when she slept here. Her friend, my aunt, my cousins, everyone heard these sounds, and they had weird experiences. The wallpaper would move as if animated, and it would be like someone was walking outside my door in the hallway. And then turning on the tap in the bathroom and creaking open the doors. My gran always had them shut at night, not sure why. Quite often, though, I'd stare at my door and suddenly it would be pushed open. Not enough for me to see the other side, but just the tiniest crack open. I stopped closing my door after a while because I fucking hated it. Things escalated, however. I'd get so scared. I'd close my eyes and I'd pretend I was dead or asleep. I couldn't even breathe due to the fear of being noticed by whatever was walking around. But whatever it was, it started coming into my room. And it was like as if I was noticed by whatever was walking around, but I don't know, it was just getting braver and trying to approach me, or maybe toying with me. Anyway, I'd have my eyes tight shut, and I'd be as still as a corpse. And suddenly I'd feel extreme pressure and weight on my upper legs and chest, as if a full-grown human had sat on them. This happened quite often, and the freaky thing is, my mom told me that she also experienced this when young. It would also feel like something was breathing on my face and touching my hand. It was extremely creepy. Not just in a paranormal sense, but as a young girl it felt really weird and uncomfortable. As if this thing had very wrong intentions, if you know what I mean. Anyway, this went on for ages. It would either lay on me or just sit on me, and I'd still be sleepwalking or waking up in those 2 rooms. One night, however, I was done. I didn't want to deal with this crap anymore, and my boyfriend had suggested to me that there might actually be someone living in the walls, and I wanted to get the cops involved, or literally anyone to help, as I was genuinely terrified. So I started being at the ready with my camera. I had a battery pack for my phone, and I'd just have it on charge constantly as my phone battery would jump from 70 to 20 to 50 to 5%. Constantly in that house due to the cold, I guess. I think this made that thing mad, as it started being more active and more loud after that. At one point, it even pushed my wardrobe, which wobbled a lot, and it was terrifying. I started seeing weird shadows on the ceiling, as if something was moving on it at high speeds, and I'd constantly be taking pictures everywhere, but with no luck. Until one day, that is. I took a picture of my ceiling, and in the corner of the picture, there was a weird white thing, like a foot or a limb or something. It had no details like toes or nails that I could see. It was just a pale white and slightly blurred, as if it was moving at high speeds to avoid the camera. I showed my mom, I showed my boyfriend, I showed quite a few people. My mom started to let me sleep alone at home because of this. My boyfriend was scared shitless. I only stayed a few nights there after that, and barely anything happened to them. Only the noises from the corridor and the bathroom, but no interactions with me or my room. Then that was it. Never slept there again. About a year after that, my grandfather passed away in the house. The fancy sitting room at the back of the house was turned into a room for him, as we didn't want him spending his last days in the hospital. He had a motor neuron disease. Something to note about him: he was very strict with how many lights we had on in the house at one time. He'd get angered if too many lights were on. He was kind of crazy about saving energy and money. Anyway, when he passed away, he had nearly all of the lights on in the house as the whole family was there. But when he passed, all the lights turned off. It was only my grand's house that had this power cut too. The nurses and doctors were so stunned that they left instantly and left the body in the house. After his passing, the sinister feeling I had in the house had gone. Well, not entirely, but it was definitely dulled down. I haven't slept there since, so I don't know if this sound still happens. My gran is usually fast asleep and has medication that helps her sleep deeply, so she wouldn't know either, but yeah, that's my experience. I've experienced a few odd paranormal things in my life, but my gran's house was by far the most terrifying and extreme. I'm not religious at all, but honestly, what I experienced in my gran's made me pray to God out of fear. Ask Reddit 3. For purposes of this post, I'll call this first location the first location. I was at a paranormal investigation, set up in an old house. I believe they mean set up in an old house. Won't give the name because it'll give my location away. We don't want that. There was 5 of us sitting in the addition on the first floor where the last owner took her last breath. We were listening to the history when from above we heard it. Footsteps walking back and forth. The lights swinging overhead with a force. All 5 of us were in this room, and nobody else was in the home. It was bizarre. We decided to head upstairs, but left a bell on the bed. And we were hoping that this ghost wanted us, if she did anyway, she can just simply ring the bell. As we headed up the very narrow and steep stairs to the second story, what did we hear? The bell. We stood there in all the stairway, trying to decide either to search upstairs for footprints or go back to the room that we left the bell in. We didn't want to split up, because then any footsteps above or below would have to be discounted, as it could easily be us. We decided to check the bell, go up. There was other things that happened in that house. Some people claimed to have been touched or felt hands on them. We would hear scratches and whispers and footprints above us, if on the first floor, or below us, if on the second floor. And this was only sometimes. On the second floor, I did do an investigation by myself while everybody else was outside. I wanted pictures, but nothing happened. I went back here 2 times and got some EVPs, but the bell was the craziest thing from that location. The second location will be called the theater. This was the last investigation I had with this paranormal group before the tragedy happened. Car accident, not related to anything paranormal. We lost 50% of the group in this. This theater still haunts my dreams. Something yanked on my necklace, and the boiler almost blew up. My voice recorder suddenly went off without me touching it, not once, but 3 times. The last time without batteries in it. I got separated from the others in the basement tunnels and found myself facing a shadow of a person standing before me. Could have been reflections. When leaving, I suddenly felt very ill and had to pull over to throw up as I left the city. I got suddenly blurry. There was an overall sense of dread. Like, if I didn't get out, something was going to happen. And back at home, my neck had scratches from where my necklace was pulled and my arms were bruised. I think spirits can feast on vulnerability. And during the theater investigation, I was very vulnerable due to the encounter with a man as I was walking from my car to the theater. So I think that I think that shook me so much. I opened myself to paranormal, and the paranormal loves to fuck with weak individuals. So it chose me to mess with. At the first location, I wasn't stressed at all, and I was able to keep my mental health strong. And therefore, the paranormal chose to focus on those who had open and vulnerable minds. I still try to go on as many paranormal investigations that I can get my hands onto. I managed to be part of a non-taped investigation with the ghost hunters in Kentucky. Went on ghost tours in London and Hawaii and Poland. I plan on visiting Waverly Hills and other haunted hotspots. But I'll never ever go back to that theater, even for $1 million. I experienced what it had to offer, and feel satisfied that there is no further business I have with that place. However, with the first location, I feel we have become good acquaintances, and I can't wait for my next visit. I feel like I haven't experienced anything that that place had to offer, so until I do, I don't mind dropping in and saying hi. Ask Reddit 4. These are the most memorable. One house I lived in was when I was a teenager. We had stuff go flying off a wall shelf unit. Helium balloons that we had all over from a party would somehow teleport around the house, despite having no path of getting ahead of you. It would be in one room, then on the second floor it'd be in the laundry room in the basement, bobbing up and down like it was being tugged on. I was alone there one night. I decided to go out. Locked the house up, and the parents were over at a boat about an hour's drive away. I came home to the dining room chairs stacked up along with other kitchen items in a magnificent way. It was all leaning up against a ceiling fan. I would routinely see the light in the hallway just turn on and just feet and shadows under my closed door walking back and forth at night, despite hearing both my parents snoring in their room. The worst one was, one night I had a couple of friends over, and I lived in the basement apartment of this house at this time. We heard the doorknob to the outside start jiggling. Not expecting anyone, I just went over, flung the door open to find no one there. This doorknob jiggling kept happening, and all of us being too freaked out really to ignore it. After a while, there was pounding in all the walls around us, just going in a circle around us. My friends decided to leave. I was left alone for the rest of the night, hearing footsteps walking up and down the stairs to the basement apartment. Later on, we just had a tenant take up that basement. He would say that he would routinely see an old lady just standing and staring at him down there. Ghost Cat Messenger. About 12 years ago, I had been to visit my grandfather, who had been in the hospital for quite a few weeks and didn't seem to be getting much better. I was sitting up on my roof thinking about him. After I had come back, as I was just having this nagging feeling that it would be the last time that I saw him, I was trying to wrap my head around the fact that I was probably going to lose him soon. I see this chubby ginger cat just standing there watching me with this intense look in its eyes. The cat looked a lot like one of the cats that we had fostered back when I was a kid, which we had originally named Ginger as well. Somewhat distracted, still thinking about my grandfather and knowing full well that it couldn't be my childhood cat, I don't know why I just called out to it going, "Hi, Ginger," and it just stared at me. I started feeling a little bit unsettled as it literally went towards what the grandfather's bedroom was and just squatted on the top of his roof, still glaring at me, but not really engaging with me in any way aside from that. Creeped me out a bit, so I just decided to go downstairs as it was soon going to become dark anyway. At night, I dreamt that I was walking along the balcony where I had been earlier that evening with my mother. And she says, "I have something I need to tell you. Ginger passed away." And I seemed to have quite a strong emotional reaction to that news in my sleep and woke up, tears in my eyes, and ran to my parents' room to tell them what I had dreamt. As I get to their room, I see that their lights are on, and my father's on the phone with the hospital. Apparently, they had rang us to tell us that my grandfather had indeed passed away just minutes before, and my mom was sitting next to my father in bed crying. I just shared a look with my parents, who nodded. No words were exchanged, and I just knew that he was gone. I couldn't stop thinking about the cat that night before, and the way that it was sitting on my grandfather's roof, just glaring at me, and how in my dream my mother told me that it was the cat that passed away, and not my grandfather. But overall, I chalked it up to just a weird coincidence and moved on with life. Fast forward a few months. I am again sitting on the roof. Yep, it was my go-to place to think and unwind. Anyway, I see the cat again, this time walking around on my elderly neighbor's roof, again glaring at me while doing so. And I remember thinking to myself in passing, "Oh God, it's the cat. I hope everything's okay with them." As I remembered the last time I'd seen him, right? But I didn't think too much of it, and I just went back to thinking about why some boy I liked in high school didn't like me back, or something silly like that. Anyway, next day I find out that her elderly neighbor had passed away in hospital, and the time of death would have been roughly right around the same time as I had seen the cat hovering over their roof. This gave me the chills, but I still didn't really want to think that this cat was some weird omen and just brushed it off as a coincidence again. Again, fast forward a year or so, and third time I see this cat. I'm walking along with my other neighbor's roof, and it's just glaring at me, and I distinctly remember looking at the cat and saying aloud, "What the fuck, Ginger? Who's gonna fucking well die now?" And sure enough, the next day I find out that my neighbor, who I was good friends with, and still am, her cousin who was born with MS had passed away the evening before. Not in that house or anywhere close though, but would have been the same time again as I saw the cat. This time I was quite exasperated and just way too many coincidences, and I got really creeped out. I started always looking out for the damn cat every time I would go up there, which was pretty much every evening, but would never see it except for these instances. Fourth and final time, which I think was probably the scariest of them all. A few months after the last incident, I was up on the roof with another friend of mine. I wasn't extremely close to this girl, but we had a group of friends over and the others had gone to pick up some food for all of us. So it was just me and let's call her Haley for this story. And we were all talking about friends of ours who we have in common and just making small talk. Really, as there really wasn't much to really talk about because we weren't all that close. She was telling me about how she heard from one of her exes, and how it was so out of the blue that we were laughing at how weird it was when suddenly I see the fucking cat again. This time, walking right next to us. Again, glaring at me. This time it even sort of hissed at us. I almost crapped myself and Haley noticed I looked horrified. She was like, "What's wrong with you? You scared of cats?" So I told her about how every time I see this damn cat, somebody dies. She looked quite creeped out, so I went, "Sorry." Continue, I'm probably just being paranoid. You were telling me about, let's call her ex, Martin. So she continued telling me about what she said to Martin when he contacted her, etc., etc., etc. And we moved on and our friends got back and we all had a great night. Sure enough, the next day Haley called me up, bawling her eyes out, telling me that she had just found out that Martin had died in a terrible car crash the evening before. Right around when we had been talking about him and seen the fucking cat. And she was freaking out and crying and she was like, "It's all that fucking cat's fault. You need to kill that cat." Martin had been in a different city than us at that time, and the only thing that stood out was that we had been talking about it when the cat appeared to us. I didn't go back on that roof for a good couple of months after that. Although, I was pretty fucking shaken up about it, and understandably, Haley literally never came to my house ever again. Got up the courage a few months after to again start going up there. That was when I got over it. But thankfully, I never saw that cat again, and haven't since. A year or so after that, I moved to Australia, and barely go back home since then. But even now, when I still do, I go back on that roof, and whenever I do, I always think about the cat, and it still gives me goosebumps. I still think about it often and honestly wonder what it was. Was it like a ghost or a reaper or just a series of crazy coincidences? I don't know. Astral projection. Hey guys, so this just happened to me today. I have a friend who comes over all the time. Sometimes even rocks up to my house unannounced, and my dog is obsessed with him. She has a special way of greeting him and everything. He has a few stories of strange, uncanny stuff happening to him. And this was all in this day in his life, and we would often just joke that he's like a wizard or a warlock, but it's always just been jokes. Today, however, something happened that neither of us can really explain, and we've been trying to figure out how to justify it since. We were chatting as we normally do over social media, and we're talking about ghost stories from his culture, and he was telling me about some supernatural beings to do with the same, a very common topic that we're both interested in, supernatural. And I left my phone to take a quick break, and while waiting for him to respond to a message to install my new clothes dryer, had to move the old one first, so it was a process of doing that. Didn't have anything in my mind at all except getting the dryer stuff sorted. Wasn't even actively thinking about our conversation, really, as it's a very common topic for us to talk about. Next thing I know, while I'm struggling with moving the old clothes dryer, I see my dog eagerly running to the door, doing her special little greeting the way that she only does for him. Couldn't have been more than 3 minutes since his last message, and he lives at least 10 to 12 minutes away, which was a bit strange, but I just figured maybe he was trying to fuck with me and decided to rock up unannounced. So I looked to the door, which was one of those foggy windows, and I see him peering in, the way he always does when he comes over. Like I've seen the image like a million times, and I know it's him. Same face, same build, same hair. Wearing like a blue t-shirt or something. There was no knock, however, but the dog was already there doing her thing, as she always did for him only. Eager for me to get to the door to open to let him in, and I saw what appeared to be him, and rolled my eyes, went to the door to let him in. Opened the door and there's no one there, but I was greeted by a weird whoosh of wind. Awkward. Still thought he's just messing around and maybe parked down the road a bit rather than in my driveway as normal, and I just hid when I opened the door. Or maybe he just hid when I opened the door, but my dog is fucking confused as hell, starts whimpering and sniffing the door and then looking at me. Then checking the door again, what just happened? I'm also confused because it isn't like him to just hide and then not come out. I'm like, what the fuck? And I just shut the door. I was definitely a tad creeped out at this point. So I went straight to my phone and I sent him a message telling him what happened. And as it turned out, around the exact same time this happened, he had randomly dozed off for a few minutes. And he was actually wearing a blue shirt, but a blue blanket on. And he sent me a picture of himself at home and the blue blanket. What the fuck? Who was at my door in blue then, looking exactly like him and peering in exactly like he does, and my dog sensed him? What did I actually see? Note, my dog is very perceptive. Had it been anyone else, she wouldn't have been barking like crazy and trying to eat them, probably. Also, she was unsettled for about 4 hours after this incident, hyper-vigilant, clinging and staring at the door and whimpering, which is very unlike her. Anyway, the whole thing creeped me the hell out. As we were trying to make sense of it, he also confirmed that he was actually thinking about my place right before he dozed off. Because we're waiting on some new furniture to arrive tomorrow, and he was just randomly thinking about how it would look once it arrives and all that. So the best we could come up with was some accidental astral projection or something. Sounds cooked, I know, but this is exactly what happened, and I'm shook. My haunted hallway experience. Not safe for work. You've been warned. During either my junior or senior year of high school, my dad moved into a new house after a divorce from my ex-stepmom. I had 2 younger siblings. Between the 2 of them, a younger brother and a younger sister. Since I lived with my mom a majority of the time during high school and stayed on campus during my first college semester, I shared a room in this house with my Anna, my younger sister, who was about 9 years younger than me. Alex, my younger brother by 6 years, had his own room down the long hall. This incident takes place in the upstairs hallway. For context, the hallway comes off from the kitchen. Going down it, you'll pass us kids' bathroom on the left, with Alex's bedroom door across from it on the right. Continuing down, the hallway ends in a small square, with the entrance to Anna and I's room and Dad's room sitting catty-corner to each other. Hope that's not too confusing. One night the summer before I started college, I was coming home late, and I was on a date with my, at the time, boyfriend. It was about 2 a.m., so everyone in the house was asleep. Coming in the house, I knew my dad was dead asleep, because I could hear his snoring. I went upstairs and walked to my room. Alex and Dad's door were shut, meaning that they were both asleep. Anna was asleep in our room, and I threw my phone onto the bed and went to the bathroom to get ready for bed. I shut the bathroom door and started getting dressed for bed and brushing my teeth. As I was finishing up and brushing my hair, I heard a noise from outside of the bathroom door, in the hallway. This didn't really surprise me, since Alex usually got up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. I went to open the door to tell him that I would only be just a second. But before I turned the handle, I stopped. The first noise I heard had been the creaking of the wood flooring in the hallway. But now I heard a different noise. It was breathing. Now that doesn't seem scary in itself, but it wasn't normal breathing. It was a heavy, not labored or anything, just heavy. I don't know how to explain it, but there's a difference between the sound of kids breathing and adults breathing when you hear it in the dead silence. But the breathing definitely sounded like an adult. I can still hear my dad snoring, so I knew it wasn't him. It couldn't be Alex. That's why I stopped in the first place. That and the footsteps moved to the kitchen, and they too sounded heavy, like a grown man walking around heavy. This was when I started panicking. My first thought was, well, an intruder. There was a sliding back door in the kitchen that led to the backyard, and our fence was by no means unclimbable. I worried that one of the kids must have left it unlocked when they had went to the park behind the house and no one noticed. I knew for sure that I locked the front door when I had come in, but since I didn't use it, I hadn't checked the back door. Since it all made sense in my mind, I started panicking even more. I locked the door and held my breath, and I could hear the breathing start to come down the hallway. The creaking of the floorboards signaled how close it was to the bathroom door. I held my breath, frozen in absolute fear. The breathing was heavy and crystal clear, like a man was standing directly on the other side of the door. I was shaking with fear. My dad always locked his door at night, so he couldn't help my siblings. I didn't have my phone on me, and I was in my room on my bed. I didn't have any sort of weapon in the bathroom. I hadn't heard any more movement from outside the door, and that breathing was still there. I slowly and quietly knelt down so I could look underneath the door. I was looking for feet. I was so scared I could hear my heart beating in my ears. There was nothing. No feet. And suddenly, no breathing. The creaking was gone too. I got up, still trying to be quiet, and grabbed my hairbrush. I figured that was the best thing I'd have for a weapon, and I was just going to have to make a mad dash to my phone on my bed. I held the hairbrush and quietly unlocked the door, then held my breath and listened. Nothing. I whipped the door open and looked up and down the hallway. Nothing. I ran to my room and grabbed my phone and called my boyfriend, that I was just on a date with hours prior. I even asked him if he could come inside after he dropped me off. I was so sure that there had been someone in this house. With him on the phone, I went through and checked the whole house. There was nothing. I checked the back door in the kitchen, and it had been locked. Alex and Anna were sleeping peacefully, and I could tell by Dad snoring he hadn't woken up either. I went to bed that night with my door locked. The next morning, I told my dad everything that had happened. He could tell that I was genuinely scared, so he checked everywhere too. Apparently, we had an alarm system, and it hadn't gone off that night. It wasn't an intruder, or at least not a person, but it was so real and so terrifying that I didn't go visit my dad for a while after that. And it was the first few months before I spent a night at that house again. Ghosts of Carmel, Maine. I found Kent's channel because I wanted to find real content capturing the paranormal side of the world. I found myself amazed at what Kent was able to capture, showing the viewer's end, and just dove in watching his videos for just being amazed. I soon caught up with his videos until recently. I remembered his channel and went to it, and I ended up watching a video called Portals into the House of Hell. At first, it was the same normal video I remember watching, until it got to a certain part of the video. Stamp 4913. This raised an eyebrow. It 100% looks fake and reminds me of those fake ghost apps where you can make one appear. So I did some research on the photo capture. I couldn't find a 100% match on it. Some similar, but nothing as body-shaped as shown in the video. Moving on around stamp 5646. Kent expresses that he found or saw a book on his table. A book with 6-digit fingers. A number 3 really got my attention. I opened the book and what I saw shocked me. While maybe Kent just didn't know where this book is from or the video is fake in that moment, the book, as some of you will see, is from the children's TV show Gravity Falls. Kent goes on about how the inside of the book shocked him. While it was truly like any other children's ghost and spell book that you would find at a book fair or online. Following up, Kent then showed a picture of some evidence that he had found a while back. A knife and 2 runes. I was curious on the runes and ended up doing a lot of research on them, and their meaning, and to see if it had just maybe been a picture from somewhere. While I did not find the exact image online, I did find similar runes online for sale. Some wood, some stone, and some differently shaped, but none exactly like in his picture. What I found out about the rune symbol. In runes, X, the meaning, gift. Gebo, gratitude, exchange, receive, or sacrifice. Out of all of the research I've done, I couldn't find the second rune that he showed us. It was a mixture of X with another rune, meaning freeze or frozen. My guess is that either that rune is 100% fake, or just so out there that I couldn't find it. Unless it was also an X, which was marked down in the center, which would mean freeze it, which would explain a series of bad luck on him and his family if it's real, maybe. I also want to point out that in the picture, at a quick glance, the black lines showing the symbol seemed like a thick carving or paint. While, if you look closer, it actually looks like he or somebody else took a photo and they drew the lines. So either he got them mistaken because of them being old, or they're fake. Moving on. Kent also shared some photos of his family and things that he had that were happening to them. I also searched for those photos one by one. I did this not to be insensitive, but for research. For starters, let's go with the cuts and scratches on the legs and arms from the cat. That very well could be true, or they could also be from playing or falling somewhere. It's very easy to fake. I did, however, not find any matches online. Same for all the photos that he shared. Therefore, they very well could be 100% his photos that he's using, or special effects maybe. I'm not sure, nor am I claiming he is. Moving on to the shadow people. I would like to have a conversation about the multiple shadow people Kent has captured. They are freaky, don't get me wrong, but the question is, are they real? From my own personal eyes and seeing these sort of things, I'd like to say both yes and no. Shadow people are very rare, especially rare to capture, let alone see. And when you might see one, they aren't what you think. They generally appear as a mist, a very dark blob, maybe a line. I'm not claiming that they can't form as a humanoid shape, but I've yet to see one like that. I have, however, seen a full body form before. A detailed older woman, clothes and all. Nothing I've seen from Kent's videos have been similar at all, as they're generally shown as shadows exclusively. I want to move on to voices from the videos, but I don't personally remember too much about each video to have a full talk. This will be the end for now. Something was haunting me when I was a kid. There was a time of my childhood where a lot of strange things happened to me. During that time, I used to have nightmares every night. Some of them were so disturbing that I woke up sweating and with my heart racing. One night when I was sleeping, I woke up because I felt a hand tickling on my neck. The hand was cold and it tickled my neck very quickly and hard. So when I woke up, I still had the sensation in my neck skin. I thought that maybe it was just a dream. I went back to sleep. It didn't go away. The tickling started happening every night, and during the day I would ask my family if it was them pranking me. But none of them took me seriously, so it definitely wasn't them. A couple of days passed, and one night I realized I'd left my jacket at my neighbor's house, which was across a little park in front of my house. It was dark outside, but I didn't feel scared to go because it was only 5 minutes away. So I decided to go as quick as possible. Everything was going all right until I started crossing the park. Suddenly I felt uneasy. This place was extremely quiet and lonely. I felt like something dangerous was watching me. And that's when it happened. I heard a deep, long moan come from between the bushes. Something that sounded like a zombie. I turned around and looked into the bushes. I will never forget what I saw. It was a tall, completely red man. He looked like he was covered in bright red blood. I started screaming and ran to my neighbor's house. They let me in and gave me a glass of water to calm me down. My heart was about to come out through my throat. I was shaking so hard that it took me a while to calm down, and I was telling them what happened. After that, they took me home. I told my family what happened, and they told me I just imagined it. I couldn't cross that park anymore from the fear. It felt like it was just too much from seeing that. I had to cross it a few times after that happened, and I heard the noise again. Just heard the noise. I never saw the man again. But no one seemed to hear it, just me. Luckily, one day it just stopped happening, as well as the tickling and the nightmares. I still don't know if it was my imagination or not, but it felt pretty real to me. Too weird to explain. For context, I do home services for work. I drive a shuttle bus that's been revamped on the inside so I can do my job. While I'm working, I usually listen to podcasts or music. However, I only use one earbud at a time in case the homeowner comes knocking on my vehicle. Maybe they need something. Yesterday, I get to my last house of the day. I make contact with the homeowner and I get into my vehicle to do my job. I get an earbud in and realize I need something, and I have to exit the vehicle. take the earbud out, and I place it on my workstation. Being that I just arrived at this home, my workstation is cleaned off and void of anything but my lone earbud. Doing what needed to be done, I get back into my vehicle, grab my earbud, and grab all my tools. Upon turning back, I see something small and white on my station. I pick it up and it's a cushion attachment to my earbud. I immediately thought how weird it was that I didn't realize it was missing. Have you ever used an earbud without one of these? Very uncomfortable. I pull my earbud out of my ear and see that it isn't missing this cushion piece. This is why this is unexplainably weird. The second cushion attachment, not even sure if that's what it's called, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, went missing months ago. I'm talking 4 to 6 months ago. Each of my earbuds had its own cushion attachment, as they're supposed to. One day while I'm working, one goes missing. I looked everywhere for that piece. After a couple of weeks not finding it, I just accepted it as lost forever and would transfer the sole cushion attachment that it had from that earbud to the earbud other one as needed. I was super weirded out. Kinda got the heebie-jeebies and called my husband to tell how this piece to my earbud magically appeared on my workstation. He's a bit of a skeptic, so he said that maybe it was just stuck somewhere and got dislodged and fell onto my table. I said, fell from the roof of my vehicle? I can't even imagine how his explanation could even be possible. Was an atheist before this. I'm a 49-year-old male. By the time I had reached my early 20s, I was of the opinion that there was nothing to life but what you could see or touch and nothing else. If you're reading this, then you know that there's basically no longer the case for this. I guess the best way to start would be to tell you about a friend that I had in high school. His name was Todd. I had met him through another guy that I had known since 6th grade. Todd was just a really good guy, always upbeat, loyal, just a solid person. Looking back on it, it's probably the most genuine human being I'd ever met, including all the way up until now. We were around the same age, and when I was around 19, it had been a while since I'd seen him. And our mutual friend calls me and tells me Todd's house had caught on fire and he had died trying to save his younger siblings during the fire. I can't remember exactly, but I know he made several trips in the house saving at least 2 of his siblings and went in again and the roof collapsed on him. And another one just 5 feet from the door, killing them both. Just a horrible thing. Couldn't believe it. It was the first person other than the elderly family member that I knew who passed. Fast forward 4 to 5 years and I'm in my car heading to a friend's house. They lived in the same neighborhood where all this happened. I may be a mile or so away from where I'm headed, and about 100 yards or a little more ahead of me, walking towards me, there's a guy in jeans and a dark goody hands in the goody pocket, and his head down, like looked at the ground as he was walking. For one, this is how I remember Todd. Seems like I always remember him wearing jeans and a hoodie, maybe a jean jacket. Narrator correction, it was not goody, even though it says goody, it was hoodie. Much more sense. Seems like I always remembered him wearing jeans and a hoodie and maybe a jean jacket. What really caught my eye was his gait. I think Todd had one leg a little bit longer than the other one. Or something that he just maybe had sort of a limp. He could have picked him out of a crowd just by his walk. It was that unique. So as we're getting closer to each other, I just feel something is not right, or just off. I can't really put my finger on it, but as I get to him, I slow down and stop right next to him, and he stops as well. As we both come to a stop, he raises his head and looks right at me. We were just about 10 feet apart. One lane of the 2-lane road anyway, and he looks at me. It's him, and his face is glowing the most brilliant green you could imagine. We look at each other for maybe 4 to 5 seconds, it seems like, and he had this calm, peaceful look on his face. I think I was in shock, I guess, I don't know, but I let my foot off the brake and coasted probably 30 or 40 feet down the road and stopped again. But I was too scared. I guess that's the word looking back, so I sat there for a few seconds and just pulled off and went to where it was going. I hear people sort of talking the colors in heaven being so much brighter or just more beautiful than colors here. And while explaining rides, I just think I get it. I think that's where this green was from. About a week before this happened, I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine. I explained to him that I was an atheist. True believer, God was on that road that day to let me know that there was something else, more to life than what we normally see. It changed my whole outlook on life in a split second. Ask Reddit. Portland, Oregon, 1994. In the area of southeast Portland, just a hair south of Flavel Street, Flavel, and 52nd, was an old historic mansion. It had that semi-Addams Family vibe to it. This place was haunted as fuck. The stories are already long, and each one could be on its own tale, so a bullet point below. If you'd like more details, ask in a reply. 1. We first heard the sounds of dogs barking, yipping, and whining in the basement the day my friends moved in there. They didn't own a dog. 2. Lights would constantly turn on behind you or off when you walked into a room. Faucets turned on by themselves. Random objects in locked rooms wouldn't be where they were left. 3. Many times my friend's family and I swear we heard a grandfather clock chime 13 times at 6:30 in the morning. 4. Many of us felt what could be described as a gentle touch, like a family member placing their hand on our shoulders. It had weight and pressure. We'd turn and nobody was there. This was made even worse when one of us had our back to the wall. 5. My friend, his older brother, and I witnessed what we'd later believed to be a ghost of the original owner. An old man ascended the staircase beside me when I went downstairs to use the bathroom. There were no elderly men in the house. 6. Many times, when driving up the long driveway, a dark figure could be observed watching people driving up to the house through a 3rd-story window on the north side. Almost every time this happened, nobody was home. 7. The eldest daughter complained constantly. She'd at random times in a room hear the sound of someone behind her, sniffing her hair. She'd turn, and she'd be alone in the room. Furthermore, she'd constantly had her door locked due to her brothers constantly bugging her. 8. Twice while watching movies in the living room, we all heard the loud and heavy noise of something moving across the wooden floor on the 2nd floor. Somehow, a near 200-pound wooden bed and frame had moved almost 9 feet across the room without disturbing the contents of the bed. 9. In my opinion, the second scariest thing happened one night while playing Dungeons & Dragons in the living room. At one point, Clarissa, the second oldest daughter of my friend's family, got up to do a little mild bit of body acting for a scene. She moved to the bay window and placed her hands on the little seat there. Her character was building up to some sort of loud outburst. She screams to the effect of, "Lord Cavington, I've had enough of you." Without warning, 3 very loud, very sharp bangs came from the window, as if someone was beating their fist on the other side. Seeing as it was still light out, we could see nobody was there. This was followed by a voice screaming from the 3rd floor, "Keep quiet, you rotten girl." That made us all nope the hell out of that night. 10. Finally, there was the door to hell. In that 3rd-story suite, we discovered there was a hidden door in the wall. It was a hideaway closet. Behind that door was a 2nd and smaller door. The moment we all discovered it, we were overcome with this utterly massive sensation of dread. We opened it. Inside was a smallish crawl space. The inner walls of the space were covered in claw-like marks as if made by human fingernails. There were darker stains in the wood when we washed it. We tried to get a better look, really. On the inside of the door number 2 were weakly carved words that read, "This is the door to hell." To this day, I and anybody else that day constantly have this door appear in our dreams. It appears randomly. Like, imagine you're walking into a classroom of your high school. You open the door to your dream, but instead of your classroom, it's the 3rd-story suite with the door to hell open. Each time you see it, you're progressively closer to the last. A feeling of predatory desire washes over you, like you're the prey. Ask Reddit. Lived in my grandparents' old farmhouse for a few years with my family after my grandmother passed away. 3 crazy things happened while we were there. One night, my wife and I were hanging in the back screened-in porch, just talking. We both immediately stopped. We saw through the old glass door a larger shadowy figure walk through the kitchen. It seemed to appear from the kitchen table, middle of the room, and walk 5 feet to the sink before walking out the opposite door from us into the house, very much like my grandpa used to do when he was done eating. He passed away in 2001. No one else was at home at the time. The kids were hanging at the movies, and the grandma, my mom, was there with them. The second thing was a wet, bare footprint on the concrete front porch by the front door. My wife was home alone. She said she heard something at the door, and when she opened it, she saw the footprint. Took a pic of it, sent it to me. Crazy thing is, no one else was there, and it was a dry summer. No water anywhere. The third thing that happened was my wife was in the kitchen cleaning dishes at the sink, and felt someone shove her in the middle of the back. The kids were at school and I was outside working. When she told my mother about that one, she told us that my grandmother had told her something similar had happened to her before, too. Mom thought it might have just been my mother's ghost, or her mother's ghost, because she was an angry person before she died. Didn't like my mom's stepmom, my grandmother. Ask Reddit. When I was in high school, my family rented this house from a family that had owned the property, going all the way back to the 1940s. They didn't want to sell the property because they wanted to keep it in the family. Often after school, when I would arrive home before my older sister, who was heavily involved in extracurriculars, I would always see her bedroom window, which faced the street, and it was wide open. I would get mad at her. I would tell her that she needed to close the window and lock it, which she swore she always did. One day I'm at home at the same time as one of the neighbors is out, and he says, "Hello," then goes, "I didn't know your grandma lives with you too." thought it was just you, your sister, and your mom. And I was like, what do you mean, my grandma? And he goes, the woman who always opens the window after y'all leave for school. Blood just went ice cold. I told him my grandma did not live with us. Same house, different incident. We had a large German shepherd named Fluffy. We kept him in the backyard, and we brought in when we got back from school or got back from work. Once again, I was home early, and I went to the backyard to play with her, and I'm about to open the back door, which has a small window and a small curtain built into it above the handle. To go inside when Fluffy freaks out, just growling and showing her teeth. She goes in front of me and stands against the door and is barking like mad. I look up past Fluffy to see the window on the door. A dark figure was looking out. Totally distorted. I noped out, ran away from the house to my aunt's, lived about 2.5 blocks away. Our back door led to the kitchen, hence the little curtain and window to peek out into the backyard. The same house also had a small tuxedo cat named Maggie. And one day my sister's out at a friend's house, and my mom is working late, and I'm by myself. So I'm just chilling, sitting in the living room. Fluffy's asleep in the kitchen, and my cat is playing in my room. When all of a sudden she darts out of my room all puffy and lands on my lap. I start to smell what smells like a dead animal in the house. I'm gagging and see a figure walk from my room. It happened so fast. Fluffy is growling like crazy and my cat is a puff monster. Luckily, I still had my school bag near me and I put Maggie in my bag with the zipper partially closed. That way she could poke her head out. And I left the back door and I just ran to my aunt's house in the middle of the night. I was just sobbing. Felt bad because if I was strong enough to control Fluffy, I would have taken her too, but fortunately she was a massive dog and was almost larger than me in height when she stood on her back legs. I don't know what I saw, but I thought I was going to die. Last night I was with my partner and our friend, and we were at a place called the Rafe Chasm. It's in Gloucester, Massachusetts. We got there at about 10 p.m., and we were just going to have a fire out by the rocks in the water. We had to walk through some wooded area to get to the rocks, and as we pulled up to the area, I had a bad feeling for some reason. And usually I trust my intuition, but I told myself I was just psyching myself out. Once we got to the spot, I immediately felt a weird feeling, but again I told myself I was just making things up. Even so, I didn't turn my back to the open space, and I was turned facing towards the woods and rock area. As the people I were with watched the fire, I stared out into the darkness, feeling like something was watching us. I decided to go to a rock further away from the fire so my eyes could adjust to the darkness. And lo and behold, I see a translucent white figure about 50 feet away from us on top of the rocks. On the other side of the area, pretty high up, it was moving back and forth, and it looked about 5 or 6 feet tall. It started to scale down the rocks, and when I say scale, I mean fast, like faster than humanly possible. And as it's doing that, it gets smaller and turns into the shape of an animal like a coyote or a wolf. Shapeshifters usually take forms of things like these. I say out loud, "Is that an animal?" And my partner looks over and immediately gets super sketched out, just as I was. The other person that we were with wasn't bothered for some reason. He said he saw it, but in the moment he was trying to convince us that it was a person, he was drunk. As I see it coming towards us, I get absolutely horrified that it's going to kill us. I tried to go up higher on the rocks to get away from it. I literally thought that was it. Thought I was going to die. I had the most horrifying feeling, and it was genuinely the scariest, most terrifying thing I'd ever felt or seen. I pulled out my phone and shined my flashlight on it to make sure I'm not tripping, and I think that I deterred whatever it was away from us, because it ended up running into the woods and disappearing. My partner and I were completely horrified, and my legs were violently shaking. I said that we need to leave immediately. The friend that we were with wanted to stay and finish his drink, but we wanted to go. He told us that he would prove that it was a human by trying to run down the rocks as fast as he could to prove that a human could be going that fast. But when he did, we couldn't hear him running around. And that's the scary part about what we saw. It was completely silent as it went down the rocks and back up them. We weren't able to process what had happened until we had gotten home after we dropped our friend off. When we did, we decided to do some research about ski walkers in the area that we were in. That's the end of today's selection of stories. That was an interesting read, and I was not ready for the Dungeons and Dragons accent there. Hope you guys have a great night. See ya.